This is Ocean Robbins, and I am so excited that in 7 minutes we are going to begin day 4 of the 2017 Food Revolution Summit. We'll be starting with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, which is 11 Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT. An hour after that, we'll have an interview with Dr. Robert Lustig, and at the top of the hour after that, we will be on the line with Dr. David Satcher. The subject for today's interviews is optimal weight for radiant health. Expert advice and insights that really work. David Klee wrote us yesterday. I want to thank you so much for conducting this food summit. It is so informative and helpful to all of us who have suffered from the effects of our tainted food and drug systems. I'm one of thousands of victims who is suffering the effects, and I am slowly recovering. In the past 5 years, I have suffered from hypothyroidism, pneumonia with sepsis, melanoma, leaky gut syndrome, and respiratory issues. I have a lot of education in nutrition and have always been interested in health and wellness. With my research, education, and personal experimentation, I've uncovered that most of the bottom line of my health problems was due to our perverse food and healthcare in quotes, system. I believe that low vitamin D3, severe gut microbe imbalances, GMO foods, and other harmful foods were at the root of my problems. I've given up meat, gluten, dairy, sugar, and soy. I buy organic produce when I can. I exercise routinely, and I'm now exploring water filters. Since making these changes, my health is greatly improving, and I need no prescription medications at 62 years of age. I feel great and ride my bike when weather permits, and I want to shout all this from the rooftops and spread the word to anyone I can. Well, thank you so much to David for sharing this story, and I can't tell you how often I hear it repeated that patients who have been facing serious and debilitating chronic illness have changed their diets and have watched all manner of symptoms vanish. And it always warms my heart, and it always inspires me, and it always lights a fire in me to keep going and keep sharing, keep engaging, because I know what's at stake, and I know the benefits can be so profound. We heard from Tina Haynes, who said, John Robbins has been asking great questions of the panelists for the past few days. This is what makes this summit so educational. His knowledge to know the questions to ask. Ocean's a great moderator too. Makes it easy to stay tuned for the next presentation. Well, thank you, Tina, so much for those kind words. I feel so grateful, of course, for our speakers, of course, also for our participants, and also for my dad. I think, as you're experiencing, he's just brilliant, and he's been in this work for decades, and his penetrating insights and his keen curiosity and his ability to go to the heart of each presenter's expertise and help to evoke it for all of us is just extraordinary. So I'm delighting in that, enjoy every interview so much, and I'm glad you are as well. If you've just joined us, this is Ocean Robbins sharing a few welcoming words. In the next 4 minutes at the top of the hour, we will be starting today's broadcasts as we come online with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson. Rebecca Fisher said, I am a single mom of 3 brilliant and beautiful kids, and I have been reading labels on foods and studying nutrition ever since the doctors wanted to put my first child on Ritalin just for being a boy. When I saw how dramatically it affected his brain and his handwriting, I said no and started adjusting his diet. My other son suffered from severe migraines as a 3-year-old, and the doctor put him on what he called the headache diet, which eliminated processed foods and dairy. As long as he sticks to healthy eating, he is good. Thank you so much for making this available. I have learned so much and look forward to sharing it with everyone I know. Well, thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that. And I'm so glad you had a doctor who thought about food and helped your child to get off processed foods and dairy, and that you're experiencing the benefits with his migraines. And I'm so glad that your other son it sounds like he's doing well. And, one of the challenges we have today is that we have a medical industry that so often focuses first on drugs, on surgery, and now in the right place, drugs and surgery can be lifesavers, and we love the power that our medical system can have to heal. The thing is that these should be last resort. The first resort should always be nutrition and health and what we can do to shore up the system so that we don't get sick in the first place. And I'm glad that you have a doctor who seems to understand that. And I hope in time our doctors will be experts in nutrition, because that's what we will want, right? And also, in the meanwhile, we all get to be experts in nutrition. And that is why we are here right now, to learn and to discover all we can. We'll begin with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson in a couple of minutes. I was touched to read a comment from Phyllis Nervis, who wrote, "My dad died of Alzheimer's. It is the most inhuman struggle I have ever seen. I have gone plant-based for 6 months now. It's a struggle, but my memory of his struggle keeps me pointed in the right direction. Thank you for this summit." Well, thank you so much, Phyllis. We all have loved ones who have passed. And one of my prayers is that their suffering and their death not be in vain. I suspect your dad would be grateful that you are using his struggles as a motivation now to help you on your path of health. As we've heard so clearly in this summit, the status quo is unacceptable. It's a fast track to suffering, chronic illness, food allergies, diabetes, weight challenges, sleep challenges, cancer, dementia, and so many other problems. But there are breakthroughs taking place as we come to understand what's possible when we make food the cornerstone of healthcare. We're going to be starting today's presentations in about 1 minute. Today's topic is optimal weight for radiant health. Expert advice and insights that really work. As always, post and share comments in the bottom of the broadcast page. And you can refresh those comments by pushing that refresh button so you can see the latest comments that have been submitted. To put this in context, consider that more than 2/3 of the U.S. population is now overweight or obese. More than 105 million Americans are on a diet right now. Less than 1% of them will be successful in releasing their excess weight. Why are so many people trying so hard to recover from something that's causing so much misery and experiencing so little results? That is what we're going to find out today. In a few moments, you will hear us on the line with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson, followed an hour after that with Dr. Robert Lustig, and an hour after that with Dr. David Satcher. I am so excited for today's speakers. We'll begin with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson in a moment. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our friend and guest, Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson. Susan Peirce Thompson, Ph.D., is an adjunct associate professor of brain and cognitive sciences at the University of Rochester and an expert in the psychology of eating. She is president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and author of the bestseller Bright Line Eating: The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. Her breakthrough Bright Line Eating program utilizes cutting-edge research to explain how the brain blocks weight loss and to help participants release excess weight forever. In the last 2 years, Susan's work has helped people to release more than 150,000 pounds. The Food Revolution Network has been proud to partner with Susan on several major projects, and we have seen the results of her work firsthand. They are real, they are stunning, and they are making a world of difference. So now, Susan, we're so appreciative of your groundbreaking work and so excited for this time with you. And now for the interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean. And Susan, what a pleasure, what a privilege to be in this conversation with you.
Oh, John, the privilege is all mine. Such a treat.
I want to begin by asking you a question that occurred to me when I was writing the foreword to your wonderful new book, Bright Line Eating. I'm someone who's been advocating for healthy food choices for a long time, and this has given me the great privilege of helping millions of people to improve their diets, and in many cases to turn their health and their lives completely around. Over these many years, I've seen a great number of people become inspired to eat in a new way. Many of those people have experienced health outcomes beyond their wildest dreams, but there are others who have struggled to sustain food choices even when they knew they were in their own best interests. They had plenty of knowledge, they had plenty of willpower, They really wanted to make these changes, but they found themselves again and again succumbing to addictive pulls. The questions that I have for you, Susan, about this is how is it that when it comes to food, so many people are unable to consistently act in their own best interests? Why is it that accomplished, caring, intelligent people are eating their way to obesity and to misery and even to premature death?
Oh, John, it's such a good question. It's kind of like the $64 million question, right? It's sort of the heart of the matter. And the reality is that different people's brains work differently when it comes to food. They respond fundamentally differently to food, and that's the crux of the issue right there.
And how, in what way are they different?
Well, basically, some brains wire really easily for addiction, and some brains don't. And we've got pretty good research on this, about the sort of spread in the population. It's in my book about like, 1/3 of the population has a brain that's highly susceptible to the pull of addictive food, 1/3 moderately susceptible, and 1/3 literally just not susceptible. Just not susceptible. Like they can take ice cream or leave it alone. They'll eat, a couple bites of a dessert and think, oh, it's a little too rich. It's a little too sweet. I'm kind of really full. I don't really want any of that. And other people's brains will absolutely respond differently to that. Their brains will say, not only do I need more of that, but you have no say in the matter. And that's the crux of the issue. Some brains are really plastic in certain areas. In other words, they wire really quickly to various stimuli. And if you have a brain like that, it can be a huge evolutionary advantage. In this way, in this food environment, it turns out to be a profound disadvantage because you have a brain that's going to get hooked on the addictive foods. That's the basic issue. I have a quiz where people can figure out how susceptible they are. It's not hard to know once you've been living on this earth for a little while which kind of brain you have.
Well, you've said that much earlier in your own life, you were on a merry-go-round with many of the most addictive substances on the planet.
But crystal meth and crack cocaine pretty much gets me into the club of people who've been addicts, I think.
I think it does. And yet you say, and this is my point, you say that nothing's harder to kick than the tyranny of food addiction. Susan,
Yeah. And I'm not even I'm not dressing that up. Like that's real for me. Sugar and flour brought me to lower places, more desperate inner turmoil than did crack cocaine or crystal meth, both of which I was addicted to for significant chunks of my life and ruined my life essentially as I dropped out of high school, like completely devastated my life, and food was worse.
well, we're starting here to enter into your personal journey. I'd like to hear more about that and how you've come to be where you are today.
Um, well, I mean, I guess I wasn't really that young. I guess I was 20 when I realized I had a very addictable brain. But looking back, it was obvious from a very young age. I was probably hooked on sugar by the age of 5. I was sneaking around to get marshmallows out of the cupboard when the grown-ups weren't looking. I was, surrendering myself to agonizing errand runs in town in blistering heat just because we'd go to a store that sold candy. And I developed a weight problem. It's funny, John, I was looking at pictures of myself just yesterday, pictures I hadn't ever seen before, pictures that my cousin shared with me. I was 8 years old in the pictures, and I have twin daughters who are 8 years old right now. So I know a little bit about what an 8-year-old girl should look like. I've got 2 of them in my house. And I looked at these pictures. I always thought that I became overweight when I was 11 or 12 years old, but I looked at these pictures and I was heavy. I wasn't obese. I wasn't, super fat, but I was not a lean, right-sized kid. I was already fleshy at the age of 8. And I was, sneaking around and eating raw cookie dough and stuff like that. And by the time I was 12, I was super concerned about my weight. And when I was 14 and I tried mushrooms for the first time, I lost 7 pounds in that one night doing mushrooms. I stepped on the scale after tripping all night and then sleeping all the next day, and I was 7 pounds lighter. And that started basically 6 years of my life where I did drugs to connect with people and to get the high and to have fun and push the boundaries, but also to keep my weight in check. And when I stopped doing drugs during that period of time, I would whack on 40 or 50 pounds in a shockingly short period of time.
When you describe losing weight by using drugs, psychoactive drugs, recreational drugs. I'm thinking of that there are healthy and unhealthy ways to lose weight. And
Right.
there's a lot of fad diets that work short term for some people, but they don't promote their long-term health. And often they don't even promote their long-term weight loss because there's a rebound effect.
Right.
What is the secret to healthy weight loss?
Right. And the tagline of Bright Line Eating is happy, thin, and free. And I am always the first to say thin is not well. Like, I'm not about getting people thin if they're not going to be also happy and free from food obsession, free from the tyranny of the scale, free from, powders and shakes and bars and all kinds of, crappy manufactured, foodstuffs. Free from the rigmarole of needing to exercise 3 hours a day to burn off the pint of ice cream they ate last night and stuff like that. Free, happy, thin, and free. I mean, I think the key really depends on which kind of brain you have, how susceptible your brain is to our current food environment. But if you've got a brain that's, let's say, moderately to highly susceptible, then I think freedom actually comes from quite a bit of structure, more structure than people think. It comes from planning. It comes from quitting the addictive foods, not trying to engage with them in moderation. It's sort of like if you were smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, you don't try to get healthy by going on the nicotine moderation program. You pony up and you quit smoking. And for someone who's got a brain like mine, or it doesn't even have to be as bad as mine, but a brain that's more susceptible, there is actually a lot more health and freedom from what I call a bright line, a clear rule. I just don't eat sugar. I just don't. I don't dance with that devil anymore. The one cookie experiment doesn't go well for me. So I think for a lot of people, a sane, balanced way to lose weight has to do with structure, and it has to do with bright lines, which most people don't want to hear. But I think people are starting to be open to that message because nothing else is working for them.
Well, in bright line eating, as you mentioned, you don't eat any sugar. You also don't eat flour.
Yeah.
And flour obviously is a refined product. It's ground and processed from grains. Most people think of whole wheat flour as a whole grain product. It's easy to see why you would exclude white flour. It provides empty calories that are devoid of nutrients. What is it about even whole wheat flour that can make it problematic for people who are trying to lose weight?
Yeah, the issue with whole wheat flour is that the two systems in the brain that get really disrupted by, let's say sugar. Let's say that someone's on board with the idea that sugar should be eliminated, right? The two things in the brain that get really disrupted are the insulin system. So baseline insulin levels have risen, and that's blocking the hormone leptin, which is keeping people's brains from literally recognizing that it's time to stop eating. So people's brains show all the physiological markers of starvation, no matter how fat they are, when their insulin levels are too high and their brain can't see their leptin. So you can quit sugar and white flour, that's fine. You'll get a lot of benefit from that. But as you transition more of your calories over to whole grain flour products, you'll find that your insulin level is not coming down the way you want it to. Another issue is with the dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, which is the hallmark of addiction. We see it the same in the obese brain as in the cocaine and heroin addicted brain. As a matter of fact, to my eye, the scans look worse in the obese brain. We have animal model studies that show that it's not ambiguous, which is the cause and effect there. It's the food that's causing the dopamine receptors to deplete. That's addiction right there. And in order to make the brain heal, in order to allow the brain to heal, what you've got to do is lay off the flood of dopamine. You got to lay off the gas on that, which means, stopping smoking crack, stopping crystal meth, stopping eating sugar, and stopping eating flour. That's the issue, is the flood of dopamine in the nucleus accumbens. And that flour, it's not grain. It's just the flour. It's the grinding part that exponentially increases the surface area of each molecule that the digestive enzymes have access to. And those digestive enzymes go boom, they have a field day with those tiny particles, and the rush of glucose and fructose, depending on what you're eating, floods into the bloodstream, gives you a nice blood sugar rise. I mean, one study showed that the blood sugar rise from eating whole wheat bread is equivalent to the blood sugar rise in table sugar, higher in some people. You literally prick your finger after you eat a slice of whole wheat bread, and prick your finger and measure your blood glucose level after you eat a spoonful of table sugar and see what happens. So that's the issue. It's the brain doesn't lie.
Susan, I'm remembering something you said a few minutes ago, that the crux of the issue is the reality that different people's brains work differently when it comes to food. So I think that for people who have a low susceptibility to food addiction, eating some whole wheat flour might be fine, while those who have greater susceptibility might be better off completely avoiding flour, like you're saying. I'm pretty low myself on the susceptibility scale. I've done your quiz, I know that. And I don't have any reactions to gluten. But I choose to eat only breads made from sprouted grains rather than from flour for the very reasons you just mentioned. When grains are pulverized into flour, their surface area expands dramatically, and the conversion to sugar happens very quickly. So I stick to sprouted grain breads. There are a number of great ones made by Ezekiel and by Alvarado Street bakeries, among others. I think people who are not highly susceptible to food addiction and who don't have difficulties with gluten can eat moderate amounts of whole wheat flour and be fine with it. But if someone has the kind of brain that makes them vulnerable to food addiction, as you, Susan, clearly do, and as many people do, then I could see that giving up white flour but not brown flour could lead to problems.
For me, when I gave up sugar and white flour but not brown flour, I suddenly found that whole wheat tortillas were my best friend, as was whole wheat pasta. And I never got happy, thin, and free. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. Bad expression, but yeah.
When you said suddenly these foods are your best friends, I think sometimes we have cravings for the very foods and they give us comfort, maybe because they placate the addiction temporarily. They're the very foods that really are doing us harm, but we have these cravings towards them. Is that your experience?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. Totally. And with a bright line for those foods, you can sort of find peace and, rediscover all the other foods that are delicious but not addictive. Yeah.
When you were talking about sugar and how much sugar is in our foods, I was thinking about too. And one of the responses by the food industry has been to create, manufacture, and sell products that use non-caloric sweeteners. And these are touted as great aids to weight loss. They're not just in diet sodas, they're in a whole lot of foods and beverages that are marketed specifically to people who are wanting to lose weight. Now, many people avoid artificial sweeteners because of the potential link with cancer, because many of them are neurotoxins. Those concerns are valid. But above and beyond those concerns, it seems that replacing sugar with a non-caloric sweetener, even stevia, can actually increase our appetite for sweet foods later on and thus result in weight gain, not weight loss. I saw a study, Dr. Terry Davidson and his colleagues at Purdue University, it was with rats, and they found that rats eating saccharin-flavored yogurt gained almost 30% more weight than rats eating sugar-flavored yogurt. Now, that's rats. But, Susan, can diet sodas actually make you gain weight?
Yeah, they can, John, and they keep your brain from healing. That dopamine downregulation that I was talking about, the dopamine rush actually is stimulated not by the glucose insulin system, but by the sweet taste buds on the tongue. So whatever it is that you're putting on your tongue that's tasting sweet is flooding the brain with dopamine. So not only does it make you fat, but it also keeps your brain from healing, which ultimately keeps your cravings alive. That's what keeps you from getting free. It keeps your cravings alive. There's other reasons not to eat artificial sweeteners. They disrupt the gut flora. So there's a really cool study a couple years ago that showed that that's one of the primary pathways that non-nutritive sweeteners, those artificial sweeteners, are bad for us, is that they cause some really bad, just bad gut flora. They kill off the good gut flora. They stimulate the bad gut flora.
That is an intense thing for a lot of people to confront. And there's been such a shift in the last 50 years If you think about the availability of sweet foods 50,000 years ago, when we were evolving as human beings, or 500 years ago, or even 50 years ago, compared with today, I find the differences to be quite striking. 50,000 years ago, the sweetest foods available to most humans were berries. And the berry bushes were in season for what, a month or two a year? Now, today, we have berries at the peak of ripeness available year round. And berries are the foods that people tell you to eat when you're trying to quit sweets. You know?
Right.
I
Right.
mean,
Because almost everything else is sweeter.
yeah,
Yeah, we're adding sugar to 80% of the calories in the supermarket. So yeah, berries are now the non-sweet foods. Yeah.
yeah. And they're full of nutrients, and I always advocate that people eat them. But 50 years ago, something happened. We had a massive change in U.S. farming subsidy policy. And this brought high fructose corn syrup onto the scene as a very inexpensive sweetener, and manufacturers began to add it to just about everything. It is now in just about every processed and packaged food in our supermarkets. Today, the average American eats nearly his or her own weight in added sugar every year. Quite
Oh,
frankly, Susan, under these
yeah.
circumstances, I wonder why we're not all morbidly obese.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very legitimate question, John, and that goes back to that not all brains respond the same. It's interesting how in this current environment, some brains are incredibly resilient against the pull of this junk that's all around us, and then some brains like mine are so pulled in. So the rewards are right there. There's a vending machine everywhere you turn. There's a movie theater, snack bar. I mean, you can hardly hit a golf ball without, in that radius hitting, 5,000 places that want to sell you crappy food to eat. And most people are rushing out of the house in the morning, having no idea where they're going to get their food that day. They just leave the house as if like good choices are greeting them where they go. And it's amazing in that environment that some people's brains just fare okay. And those are the brains that orient toward the food itself, but not the cues that predict the sugar, flour, food rewards. The brains that orient toward the cues, it turns out, like mine, in rats they call them sign trackers, brains that orient toward the signs that tell you that a hit is coming. Those are the brains that get into trouble. And evolutionarily, those were the smart brains. Those were the brains that were sensitive to the cues that predicted what was happening, like the cues that predicted that a rattlesnake was in the bush, the cues that predicted that the storm was going to come and water the crops, the cues that predicted that we should head over that hill to get more food. But these days, the brains that are sensitive to those cues get enraptured by the cues and sucked toward them. There's actually research toward this. The pull is almost magnetic. We almost can't get out of it. And so the golden arches, the time of day, the emotion, the mood, all of those cues that have come to predict food rewards, whether it's, tucking in your kids at night and all of a sudden it's time to eat something, or it's Friday night and so now you've got to go to a restaurant that's going to make you feel celebratory and everything. All of those cues that predict rewards are what sort of keep us trapped in their gravitational pull. And that's why for some of us it's something that I don't think people have thought deeply about, but I talk about it in my book, and it's one of the reasons that some of us find it so hard to quit.
Yes, and our culture normalizes it, and we use sweets to celebrate. We use sweets to reward ourselves and each other. This is so embedded in our culture. Uh, When we change our eating, when we start to get healthier, it can be very threatening to some other people, even to ourselves.
Yeah.
And sometimes those people are very close to us. They could be acquaintances, they could be coworkers, they could be friends, they could be spouses, they could be members of our families. Sometimes they jab at us, or they just look askance at our efforts, or they mock us, or they criticize us, or in some ways they kind of sabotage our efforts. And Susan, how do we deal with that? How do we become happy, thin, and free if there are people close to us, people we are interdependent with, who are less than supportive, shall we say, of our healthy choices?
Ah, such a good question, John. And I think it does come down to these social interactions for most people. If you can't face the social reality of food embedded in the real world with your friends, with your family, with your colleagues, you'll never get there, right? Because food is part of the fabric of our relationships with people. And I think, the short answer that I have to your question is you got to build your own support network. So I don't find people doing very well with this in isolation. In Brightline Eating, we've got a boot camp where we have the most incredibly supportive online community that I could ever imagine. And people bring those comments to the community. I shared this with my sister yesterday, everybody, and guess what she said? And everybody's like, oh, sweetheart, I know she doesn't understand, but we understand. And, you buck up and it's okay. And we're here for you. And, maybe next time you could say this or, whatever. People get the love of people who understand because it is kind of still a world out there that doesn't understand. It really is. It is changing, but slowly. And I liken it to the change that's happened with cigarettes or alcohol over the last 50 years. When I was a kid, there was smoking on airplanes and in restaurants and everywhere. And now smoking is allowed, but you kind of have to go do it off by yourself, right? You're not allowed to do it in everybody's face. And I look forward to the day when food is like that. I mean, today, if you try to say no thank you to pumpkin pie on Thanksgiving, people will heckle you still today, even if you have diabetes, and you're trying to save your own life. People will say, come on, it's Thanksgiving. Can't you've been so good on your diet. You can, and you could try to say, I don't eat sugar. It's a way of life for me. And, they'll still heckle you. Whereas I think we've gotten over it for alcohol, where if somebody is holding up their hand on New Year's Eve as the champagne is being poured into the flute glasses and they say, no, thanks, I don't drink. I think in most places we've gotten to the point where someone would respect that and go, oh, okay. And, see if maybe they could get them some sparkling water or something to enjoy the toast. I look forward to the transition that I hope and pray is happening in our society where, that is one of the things that changes is that we stop pressuring each other to eat unhealthy food.
You talk about in your online community the importance of community support in general, and then that in your online community, people get the love of people who understand. And that reminds me of our journey as a culture with alcohol and the 12-step work and AA, which are very much about people congregating with people who understand the journey. Now, your program draws on some of the principles of 12-step work, but it's not exactly the same. What have you found valuable in 12-step programs that you incorporate into Brightline Eating, and how is what you offer different?
Such a good question. I come from a 12-step background. I got clean and sober when I was 20, and I have spent most of the last 22 and a half years just in, really profoundly involved in 12-step programs, a variety of them. I've worked the 12 steps in 5 different programs. But I would say, for example, the one day at a time approach, where we don't necessarily commit to bright lines forever. We say, well, let's just commit for today, see how today goes. And if we like it, we can re-up tomorrow. That would be one example. I think the bright lines at all, I think just having the clarity of saying, look, we've known for a long time as a scientific community that sugar is addictive. I think we're coming to understand that flour is addictive. But in the scientific community, because people don't have a 12-step background, they haven't thought more deeply about it than that. Well, if it's addictive, then doesn't it mean that some people are going to really need to abstain in order to get freedom? And that notion of abstinence is something that our society just hasn't wrapped its head around yet. That, yeah, if that stuff's addictive, then abstinence, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, they're going to find, no peace, no rest until they finally abstain. So I think that is a 12-step idea. And the support in general is very much akin to the sort of unconditional love and support in flaws, in imperfections. Just show up as you are. It's very 12-step. Now, there are a lot of differences. I mean, one of the biggest differences, I think, is that 12-step programs aren't, and never claim to be, scientifically based. They're just not. They're a folklore. They're an oral tradition. You do what your sponsor did because they said so. And there's beauty in that because with thousands of people jostling around in 12-step programs and sort of a Darwinian sort of effect happening, you end up kind of with what works. But in Bright Line Eating, we take some of that, we learn from what works, but we also learn from the science. So if the science shows a new thing tomorrow, we may very well update. So for example, right now in Bright Line Eating, I say don't drink smoothies, because that's my understanding of the current state of the science. If science shifts and it turns out, oh, certain kinds of smoothies don't cause a dopamine flood, don't mess with insulin levels, then it'd be like, oh, okay, let's try some smoothie consumption and see how it goes for people. And maybe we'll change our stance on that. So the commitment to science and to sharing the science of why it works is one big difference. No explicit God orientation is another big difference for people who don't want God or higher power mixed in with their program. We're open to notions of spirituality and divinity, but it's not woven into the program in the way it is in a 12-step program. And then obviously, Bright Line Eating is a company, right? 12-step programs are, just a collection of individuals with no leaders so it's just run entirely different, right? We have employees, we have payroll. So it's just, that's obviously different as well.
Well, you're trying to bring this into the 21st century and make it relevant to people's lives today, and even more than relevant, make it effective, make it transformational for people's lives today. And I hear you saying again and again that one of the problems with refined foods, with sugar and flour, is that they release an unnatural flood of dopamine that hijacks the pleasure centers in the brain and causes cravings, cravings in unhealthy directions.
Yeah.
Susan, are we seriously underestimating the addictive power of refined foods?
Yeah, John, we really are. We really are. 70, 80,000 people in America each year walk into a leg amputation. They know it's coming. They've got diabetes. And their doctor says, yeah, this is getting really bad. You're about to go blind. You're about to lose your leg. The next time I see you, we might be cutting off your leg. And you need to stop eating this and this and this. And they can't do it. They somehow, on a moment-to-moment, they show all the signs of the crack addict whose wife and little kids are about to leave if they smoke one more time. And they can't stay away. We are absolutely underestimating the addictive power of these foods. I mean, my colleague Mark Hyman says that sugar is 8 times more addictive than cocaine, and I'm not sure that he's wrong about that. I think that sounds about right from my experience. I mean, rats pre-injected with intravenous cocaine over and over and over again until they're addicted. They're quivering cocaine addicts, but you give them the option of sugar or another hit of cocaine, and they choose the sugar. It's just remarkable. We are grossly underestimating the addictive power of these foods, and we're giving them to our kids in their 6 months to 1 year span of life. 60% of American 1-year-olds are eating candy every day. And the first food that almost all kids in America get is flour. Rice flour mixed in with rice cereal mixed in with the bottle or whatever is almost always the first food for kids. It's flour. So we give them sugar and flour, right from birth. Most people in America have never gone a day in their lives since they were 6 months old without sugar and flour.
I have a friend who came to mind while you were describing the people with diabetes who are threatened with an amputation of a leg and still can't stop eating the foods that are fueling the diabetes progression, and are unable to shift to the dietary changes that would reverse it, not just arrest it, but reverse it. And I have this friend who's quite overweight and has a lot of back problems as a result because the weight pulls on his back, and he's got knee problems as a result. And his doctor said, if you keep up what you're doing, in a year you will be in a wheelchair. So he's making his travel plans now. So he's going to do the traveling in the next year that he wants to do before he's in a wheelchair. Now,
I'm sorry to laugh. I'm sorry to laugh.
It's a painful laugh. It's a painful reality.
It's a painful, uncomfortable laugh.
Yeah, I understand.
It's like the alcoholic. The judge has told him, the next time I see you here, we're not going to talk. I'm throwing you in prison for a year the next time I see you, like drunk driving. I've seen you now 5 times, and so when they just look at their calendar, like, okay, I'm going. Like, what's going to happen to my kids, my job for a year? I better inform my boss,
Yeah, right.
Oh. Oh, good Lord.
There's so many factors involved here, but a lot of us have used food to suppress difficult feelings, to create distance from painful experiences that we have not known a better way to cope with. And as a result of that, some of us are very afraid to change because we know how much we've stuffed life down, and we fear that if we were to be leaner and healthier, if we were to stop using food to numb out, we would have to face the feelings that we have avoided. Now, even with the greater aliveness and the greater vitality that comes with healthier eating, we fear that we wouldn't have the capacity to face those challenges. Susan, if we've been using food to suppress feelings for a long time, what is going to happen if we stop doing that?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. So you put down the food, and what happens is those feelings start to come up. Usually not in an overwhelming flood. Usually they come up in sort of bite-sized chunks each day, but you have moments where you realize, oh, I would have been eating over this right here for sure. I would have been eating over this. And you get afforded opportunities to learn to do it differently. And it's really helpful to do it in community because, what you turn to then is you send someone a text message. Hey, my boss just said XYZ and, the donuts in the break room are looking really good right now. And you hop on the phone with somebody and they talk you down. You get into the online support community and you post about it. You journal. If you're an introvert, we have a lot of introverts in Bright Line Eating, obviously, about half the population, funny enough, and they journal. They pull out a journal or they go sit quietly in the bathroom or in a private room and they just take a few deep breaths, and you learn to not respond to life by eating. And what happens is as the brain rewires, this is sort of a longer explanation to really substantiate what I'm about to say, but in my experience, about 80%, now that's not research backed, that's just my sense, of the lion's share of someone's psychological issues, like the deep-seated issues, start to melt away as they just start to get clear and structured and have integrity around their food. That what was happening was betraying themselves with the food they were putting in their mouth, and watching themselves do it was creating a smokescreen of psychological ill health, where they came to believe that they didn't love themselves, they didn't trust themselves, they must hate themselves because of the way they were treating themselves with food. And when someone is shown how to pre-commit to what they're going to eat each day, and then actually follow through one day at a time and eat only and exactly that, with no sugar and no flour, an abundance of vegetables and whole real foods, and they stick to it one day at a time, they build up a foundation of integrity with themselves. And within that climate and the supportive environment that I'm talking about, the community, those issues that we used to eat over can be faced finally, one at a time. A lot of it melts away. Like I said, a lot of it's a smokescreen, but there are real issues there. And we have a course called Bright Line Healing, which people take after the boot camp to come home to themselves. It's a coming home process, John. It's like you were right there all the time, but you were so distracted from the world and the food that you were using to react to the world that you lost yourself. And so what happens when someone stops that is they learn how to come home.
One of the things I think that keeps people from coming home is that most of us have inner saboteurs. I mean, you talked about betraying ourselves with the food we put in our mouths.
Yeah.
We have a lot of ways of betraying ourselves. We have voices in our heads that seem to want to undermine our best efforts, that tell us we're not good enough, we're unworthy, we don't deserve to enjoy life, we don't deserve to celebrate ourselves, that if we're going to celebrate, we should do it with sugar and ice cream and cake. And sometimes our inner saboteurs are actually very subtle and hard to recognize for what they actually are. So, Susan, I guess I have two questions for you. How can we recognize our inner saboteurs for what they are? And How can we transform the energy they contain so that we aren't any longer controlled or defined by them?
Such a great question. In general, any voice in our head or impulse that is blocking growth, having us do unhealthy things, um, seeking the quick fix or the expedient but damaging action is a saboteur. Saboteurs, by their very nature, stifle human growth. They yeah, they want us to just take the easy, short, expedient way out. And they whisper at us to just kind of take that path. Um, the highest self knows better. I think two things need to be done with the saboteur. The first, and this is kind of helpful at the beginning, like when someone's just doing bright line eating and they're in their first few days of withdrawal, and the saboteur is really trying to talk them into putting a bunch of cream and sugar in their coffee or whatever it is, just this once, you deserve it, blah, blah, blah. I think just dealing with the saboteur really firmly, thanks for sharing. I'm not doing that today. That's not my food. And I'm going to get through this day. Thank you very much, without sugar on my coffee. Um, Sort of in the same way that as a parent, sometimes you find that with love, you need to smack back your kids a little bit. I don't mean hitting them. I mean, like, just sit down, be quiet now. That's not appropriate. Like as a parent, I have 3 kids, and sometimes you need to get really firm with them. Time to stop now. And that kind of tone with a saboteur, not out of venom, but out of appropriate firmness, I think is really helpful. But as you go further down the path, what's also helpful to notice is that behind the saboteur is something else. There are wounded parts back there. And those wounded parts might be really abused little kids, rebellious teenagers, middle schoolers yearning for some attention and some love and some comfort and safety, depending on what kind of environment you grew up in or how you've been treating yourself since you grew up. We have wounded parts to ourselves. And those wounded parts are often trying to get us to eat because it's comforting and it's numbing. And for a moment, it works. And what they want is for us to be safe and happy. So what you can do is try to kind of explore those wounded parts a little bit. I recommend doing this with some help, a professional who does some parts work, IFS, and there's lots of different ways of doing this. But learn about those parts, find out their stories, and then explore ways to talk with them and sort of have a mediated discussion where you let them know, look, we're not doing the food thing anymore, but how can we find the comfort anyway? Like there is another world of comfort out there. Let's find it together. Let's find the bubble bath and the heating pad and the cup of herbal tea. Let's find the good book and the fireplace. Let's find the walk with a friend. Let's find the comfort because I want to give it to you and I want you to be safe and happy. But we're not doing the food thing anymore. So we're going to have to find a different way, okay? And that kind of growth experience is a way around the saboteur, to finally learn the inner landscape that's been driving the whole thing.
I hear you talking about finding comfort and finding safety, but instead of reaching to food, and particularly to unhealthy foods for that, reaching to the vast array of other options that when we are addicted to food, we don't know are there. We don't see them.
Right. Or, yeah, we're just not taking advantage of them. Yeah, totally. There's so many other options. The voices in the head, John, are really important. I was thinking about your friend that you mentioned, who's basically resigned himself to living in a wheelchair after this year. One of the things I write about in the preface to my book is how we don't have an obesity problem. I say we have an obesity mystery. It's just mysterious that this is happening around us. And one of the things that I think is most mysterious is that the population at large remains so veiled to this bizarre thing that's happening around us, which is that so many people want to get thin and can't. And it baffles me that people are failing so badly and not aware that it's weird that they can't do it. And the crux of the issue, I think, is what's happening with your friend, John, which is that as he makes choices, now I'm not going to pick on him, I'll just say in general, as we make choices, to eat in a way that's clearly not in alignment with our highest good, right? I mean, this guy knows he's going to spend his life in a wheelchair, and he's, going to go get a burger and a fries and wash it down with a milkshake, right? As he makes that choice, what leads up to that is a brain that's spinning a story about it and whispering to him in his own voice in a way that he still thinks is him making a decision. And this is the issue, is that we've confused the voices in our head that are actually, neurologically speaking, a brain hijacked by sugar and flour and our current food environment. That hijacking actually causes an audible narrative in our head that manipulates us and convinces us to eat. And we mistake it for our own voice. And the way I like to introduce people to this idea is I ask people, like, I wish I had like a duffel bag with $100,000 in it, and I could do this with someone live in person, like $100,000 of $100 bills bundled up. Here you go. I will give this to you if you can hold your breath for 2 minutes. Here's the timer. Ready, set, go. And what I ask them to do is to listen to the voice in their head that convinces them to breathe before the 2 minutes are up. Because what will happen is there will be a narrative that will spring up, and it will sound like them. The brain is actually demanding the oxygen that it believes it needs to survive. But it convinces us to take a breath before the 2 minutes are up, even though we obviously want that $100,000 to be the easiest money we'd ever made, right? Just easy, just hold your breath for 2 minutes, but we can't do it. The brain will force us to breathe. And in that exact same way, but just over a longer time horizon of weeks and months as opposed to seconds, the brain is literally forcing us to eat. And it does it in that same way by manipulating our thinking. And I want people to learn what that manipulation sounds like so they can recognize it. It's not them. And that's why everybody's blind to what's happening, because people believe that they're choosing it. We're all complicit in it. Our brains are blocking us from losing weight.
Well, your point that the narrative in our head is that we identify with. We think it's our own voice. We think it's our heart, our soul, our own thinking. It's us. But it's actually something that we've internalized from the culture or something that is a byproduct of an addictive process, and it's leading us astray. You referred to the friend of mine who may end up in a wheelchair that I had mentioned, and you said, well, so he'll eat burger and fries. Actually, this fellow doesn't eat burger and fries. He eats more healthy than the norm in our culture. It's still not good enough. He's going the direction he's going. He's very overweight. He's got all these problems. Those are real. But the narrative in his head says, I'm eating healthy. And when he looks at the people eating burgers and fries and milkshakes all day, he is eating healthier than they are, but he's obviously not eating healthy enough for his well-being, his optimum functioning, his highest potential, his ability to walk.
Mm-hmm. And we're back to the whole wheat flour thing, right? He's probably eating organic black bean brownies and oat date bars. I mean, I'm just guessing, right? You can go into any health food store.
that would be more the direction. Yeah.
You can go into any health food store and probably, I wonder in a health food store, what percentage of the calories have added sugars to them. It would be pretty high. If you take added sugar or flour, it would probably be pretty high. I wouldn't smoke organic crack that was locally sourced, and gluten-free.
They do sell organic Twinkies.
Right?
And I was talking to John Mackey, who is the founder and CEO of Whole Foods Markets, and he said 90% of what we sell in our stores is junk. He knows it, but that's where the profit margins are.
That's right.
That's where the revenue stream comes from. And he justifies it because that enables them, they have the profits then, to enable them to also sell healthy foods. It's a culture of disease. It's a culture of toxicity. And we've internalized it into our thinking, into our bodies, into our cells, into our relationships to food, into our relationships to our bodies in so many ways. Susan, I'm thinking about how in the last 2 years, the Food Revolution Network has collaborated with you. And together we've put on a pair of 8-week courses. And between those two courses, we had about 5,600 participants, the vast majority of whom joined the program hoping to lose weight. And in 8 weeks, They combined to lose more than 90,000 pounds. When I first saw that number, 90,000 pounds lost in 8 weeks, I was just floored. And I was also filled with gratitude because I thought of the cases of diabetes that had been averted, of the heart attacks and cases of cancer that had been prevented. And I thought of all the people who now can be more present in their lives, who feel more confident in their bodies, who can show up more fully for the people they love. And Susan, I so appreciate your work. I appreciate your wisdom, your clarity, and your compassion, and how you help people to live the lives they truly want to live. It's a privilege to know you, to be your friend and colleague, to have your voice and wisdom as part of this summit. On behalf of Ocean and myself and everyone involved in the food revolution, I thank you for your ongoing wonderful work and, of course, for being with us today.
Thank you, John. Such a pleasure.
We've been talking with Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson, president of the Institute for Sustainable Weight Loss and author of Bright Line Eating, The Science of Living Happy, Thin, and Free. Susan, food's an area in which the vast majority of people are consistently acting out of keeping with their own best interests. And it's really painful to contemplate how much self-hate and how much suffering is ensuing from addictive relationships with food. At the same time, it is so heartening and so inspiring to see the opportunity your work is opening for real food freedom. And when I see the depth and the power of your work and take in how many people I know whose lives have been personally transformed by it, frankly, I want to get it out as widely as possible. We want to thank you so much for your brilliant leadership, for your penetrating insights, and of course, for your partnership in the food revolution.
Thank you both so much. Really, really a pleasure.
Always.
Yes.
I'm so touched to be a part of this again this year. It's such an honor.
Thank you so much to Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson and to my dad and colleague, John Robbins, for that riveting and incredibly powerful and incredibly important conversation. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcast page. Make sure to refresh the comments using the button that's provided there so you can see the most recent comments that have been submitted. Our next presentation will be an interview with Dr. Robert Lustig. It will start at the top of the next hour, 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern, 4 p.m. GMT, followed by Dr. David Satcher at the top of the hour after that. And now I want to respond to and share my thoughts about a few of the comments that we've been receiving. And also, we'll be giving away another empowerment package in this next segment. So we heard from Sherry Howie, who said, wow, what a powerful story that eating bad food like sugar and flour was a stronger addiction for her than drugs like crystal meth. I'm just realizing what a sugar addict I am. I always thought eating things like whole wheat bread was good for me, but what Susan is saying makes so much sense. One piece of bread made me want more and more. Don't even get me started on pasta. Well, yes, Sherry, it's so true. You know, Susan shared just now that 70,000 people every year walk into a leg amputation because they literally can't change their diets. We are grossly underestimating the addictive power of addictive foods, and we're feeding them to our kids. It's time for us to take food addiction very, very seriously because a great many people do not feel like the authors of their own food lives. And if we're going to create a real food revolution, we have to be able to bring our food choices into alignment with our values, and that means being able to make food choices, being actually the chooser of what we eat. And for a great many people, they do not feel at choice. Now, some people who are low on the susceptibility scale that Susan talks about, who are not highly susceptible to the pull of addictive foods, might be listening to this thinking, that's crazy, don't be ridiculous, you just eat differently, right? And for many people, that works. But for some people, it's not so simple. And I think the example Susan gave of trying to hold your breath for 2 minutes, if you could win $100,000, and how powerfully your brain will start having thoughts that tell you your survival is at stake and you must breathe. We can all relate to that, right? And I think that when it comes to food, understanding the neuroscience of food addiction is so critically important. So I'm thrilled that Susan is doing this work and sharing it with the world. We heard from Sarah Zedinek, who said, I have watched the Brightline videos Susan has recently posted. They are amazing. I ordered her book from Amazon and should have it tomorrow. Thank you so much for challenging me to recognize that it isn't a lack of willpower. I'm not flawed. It is about how my brain works. Susan is saving my life. Thank you, Sarah. I'm so glad that you're watching the videos and ordering Susan's book and putting this into practice. I actually know a lot of people who feel that her work has saved their lives. We heard from Angie Litchfield, who said, today's lineup is exactly what I need. I have had a sugar addiction my whole life, which has led to the obesity and depression I live with today. I have a very literal emotional reaction to the idea of quitting sugar and flour. I feel good and inspired by all the words of the summit thus far. But what is the key to truly making the shift? I hope that by next year's summit, I will be a success story like those that many people have shared. Angie, thank you for sharing this. I see you being a success story in next year's summit. Please reach out to us and tell us, because I know you're listening, engaging, and learning right here and right now, and this stuff works. My dad mentioned that we've produced 2 programs with Susan in the last couple of years. 5,500 participants, released 90,000 pounds of excess weight, and became not just more thin, but also more happy and more free. This stuff works, and it's powerful. We heard from Sherry Howie, who said, wow, what a powerful story, that eating bad food, I think I just actually covered this one, so I'm going to move on to Sarah Ween. Sarah said, I score a 10 out of 10 on Susan's susceptibility quiz. I'm so grateful for this program. I've lost almost 20 pounds since January using Brightline eating. My high blood pressure is gone. My skin is clear. I sleep well. My food obsessions have abated, and I love and appreciate all the real good food I eat. It is a real solution for those of us who have high addiction propensity and have struggled to keep the weight off. It is rigorous and unambiguous in its rules of what to do to achieve one's goals of freedom from the addiction to sugar and flour. It may not be for everyone, but it has opened a door to freedom for those of us who have struggled to get over our addiction to processed foods and sugar once and for all. I look forward to a lifetime of new health using BLE. Well, Sarah, I'm so glad that it's been useful for you. I'm so glad. And we hear so many of these stories. And by the way, for everybody listening right now, you can get Susan's new New York Times best-selling book, Brightline Eating. It's available online. It's available in bookstores all over the world. And also, there's a quiz, a susceptibility quiz she's put together. And if you actually click on the link from the broadcast page next to Susan's bio, or I think it'll be on the replays page actually, you'll be able to click through to take the quiz yourself and find out how you score on the susceptibility scale to food addiction. It's a powerful quiz, and it's deeply informative. For somebody who scores low on the susceptibility scale, you have a lot more flexibility on stretching a little bit, having a little bit of this or that. For people who are high on the susceptibility scale, you need much brighter lines. You need much sharper contrasts, because if you do a little bit, it's like an alcoholic can't have just one drink, right? You've got to have that sharp line. And similarly with addictive foods. We heard from Linda Hahn, who said, I've lost over 100 pounds with Susan Peirce Thompson and Brightline Eating, and have maintained for 1.5 years. It's amazing. I'm 69 and can't believe I'm wearing size 2/4. Wonderful, Linda. I am so glad to hear it. We also heard today from Farzeen Shoku, who said, good morning. I just listened to yesterday's recording this morning one more time. I listened to John's interview with Vandana once again. I am amazed at the highest level of consciousness of you all. I've just got to know you several days ago, and I have the deepest respect for who you are and what you're doing. I am in full tune with you and spread your message as fully as I can. Well, Farzeen, I have some good news for you. We love that you're listening to these interviews multiple times, and we want to help you listen to all of them as many times as you want for the rest of your life. And I hear you want to spread this message. We want to help you do that. So you are a recipient of this segment's Empowerment Package giveaway. Our team will follow up with you, and you will have the MP3s and the transcripts of the entire Food Revolution Summit, plus more than $2,600 worth of bonuses. And that is our gift to you and our support to you on your path. And congratulations. And congratulations also to all of the recent buyers of the Empowerment Package, including Mary from Minnesota, Riley from Canada, Judy from Massachusetts, Irina from Canada, Beverly from Georgia, Gary from Wisconsin, Terry from Virginia, Helena from Florida, and Susanna from United Kingdom. And congratulations to everybody else who is getting informed and stepping up and learning and engaging and sharing this powerful, life-changing, critically important message. We're so glad to have all of you with us. We heard from Nikki Jaffe, who said, "This is such an amazing summit. So happy to get such great information and so much of it. I've been suffering with severe Crohn's for almost 12 years now and had to go through surgery last year. After surgery, I switched to a plant-based diet, and I am so happy I did. I'm finally medication-free and on the path to a healthier life with only a plant-based diet. Thank you for sharing this amazing information." Well, thank you, Nikki. I'm so glad to hear your story and so glad you're sharing it. I'm grateful that your suffering is relieved. I'm grateful that you are feeling so much better. And I'm grateful that your example can help inspire others. There are so many people hurting right now with the status quo. So many people who feel that it's their fault, that they're sick, that they're addicted to toxic foods, that they're overweight and feeling like crap, and who don't realize there's a door out of this prison. There's a path forward out of the suffering. We can create health and vitality, beauty and joy, lightness and ease, like we never knew was possible. And it all starts, in so many cases, with what we eat. We're discovering that. This is powerful stuff, it's real, and it works. We heard from Melanie Kohler-Schlager, who said, "Thank you, Susan, John, and Ocean, for your work and your time. This may be the most important talk for me. I would have said I don't have an addictive personality. I haven't taken the test, but I'm sure I'm addicted to food, in that my brain has no 'I'm full' button. And I have eat all the food on your plate guilt, which makes it easy not to stop, even if I'm trying to be more mindful. The only thing that's reversed that so far is stimulant medications for ADHD. They somehow get me to be mindful and in the moment enough to recognize I'm full and able to put the fork down and even to not care there is food on my plate. The last year I've been trying to deal with the ADHD med-free and notice these issues come back more prevalent. It's frustrating to feel powerless when trying to better myself and manage my ADHD pharmaceutical-free. I will be looking into your programs." Well, Melanie, I'm sorry that you're struggling with this, and you're not the only one. There are a lot of people struggling with this. And I'm so glad that you'll be looking into Susan's programs and that you're participating in this summit. I hope it is able to support you on your healing path. And now, everyone, we have a treat in store for you, a healthy treat, a sugar-free treat. It's time for us to move to the next segment of our broadcast, which is an interview with Dr. Robert Lustig. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. Robert Lustig. Dr. Robert Lustig is professor of pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology at the University of California, San Francisco, and the director of weight assessment for UCSF's Teen and Child Health Program. He's author of Fat Chance, The Hidden Truth About Sugar, Obesity, and Disease. Nearly 7 million people have watched Dr. Lustig's provocative YouTube video, Sugar, The Bitter Truth. His groundbreaking quest to understand the scientific underpinnings of sugar addiction has been featured on 60 Minutes and most of the major news outlets of our times. Dr. Lustig has authored more than 120 peer-reviewed articles and trained more than 50 other health professionals. He is featured in the provocative and groundbreaking films Fed Up and Sugar Coated. So now, Dr. Lustig, my dad and I are so glad to have this time with you. And now for the interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, and thank you, Rob, for being with us once again. It's a pleasure to bring your voice to our audience.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Sugar once was something we added to coffee and tea, we baked cookies with, we consumed it in limited amounts, and maybe even more importantly, we had control over how much we added to the foods and the beverages we consumed, so we knew what we were doing. Now, things have changed. We don't know how much we're eating. We don't have control, however, over how much is in our food. It's added to peanut butter and salad dressings and pasta sauces and supposedly healthy choices, things like fruit-flavored yogurt. And well, it's really added to just about every packaged food that's sold in just about every supermarket in just about every city in the country. I'm thinking about vitamin water, for example. It's sold as a supposedly healthy beverage. But a 20-ounce bottle of vitamin water contains as much sugar as 3 Krispy Kreme glazed donuts. Sugar now comprises something like 18% of our total calories. We're consuming at least 25 times more of it than our ancestors did. So what I want to ask you, Rob, is do we even know what this huge increase in sugar consumption is doing to our lives and to our health?
Well, we do, in part because of what's happened over the last 40 years in terms of the obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease, this whole metabolic syndrome pandemic that has occurred. Now, I am not going to tell you that sugar is the cause of metabolic syndrome, but it is certainly a cause, and it is a manipulable cause. It is a preventable cause. Based on our data, we have calculated that 29% of all of the type 2 diabetes in this country is due to sugar and sugar alone. And across the world, 25%. And you know that there are countries that are diabetic without being obese, such as India, Pakistan, and China. And the question is, if obesity is the problem, how come these countries that are not obese have such a high prevalence of diabetes, higher than ours? And the answer is because it's not about the obesity, it's about the sugar. The way we need to look at this, instead of looking at sugar as its calories, we need to look at sugar as an environmental insult. In the same way we look at, say, BPA, and the same way we look at alcohol. It's not because of the calories that alcohol carries with it. It's because of the alcohol molecule itself. Well, the sugar molecule, specifically the fructose molecule that's sweet, the molecule that makes us want it, the molecule that makes us crave it, has some very specific properties that ultimately impact our metabolism, our brain, our health, and ultimately our society. And as we've come to understand this molecule better, we've been able to basically pinpoint at least one, if not the major cause of disease in this country.
Well, if I understand your findings accurately, total caloric consumption really doesn't correlate that much with diabetes prevalence worldwide, but the correlation is absolutely staggering between calories coming from sugar and diabetes incidence. Is that an accurate summary of your findings?
That's exactly right. We did a study. It's called an econometric analysis. This looks at availability of specific calories within countries across the world and across time. So the Food and Agriculture Organization statistics database, that's part of the WHO, computes the number of calories per day per person in every country on the planet, 175 countries total, going forward year after year after year. So this doesn't give you the snapshot. This gives you the movie. This gives you the time analysis. And what we did was we looked at the different kinds of foodstuffs, grouping them. So total calories, of course, fruits excluding wine, to look at, fruit that is sugar with fiber, meats, cereals, fiber-containing foods, oils, dairy, and finally, sugar crops, and sweeteners as line items, moving forward from the year 2000 to 2010. What we found was that if an extra 150 calories per day were available in any given country, diabetes prevalence went up a total of 0.1%, which is nothing. But if those calories happen to be a can of soda instead, diabetes prevalence went up 11-fold to 1.1%.
Wait a minute. I want to make sure I'm getting this and that our listeners are. Are you saying that on average, if a person increases their daily caloric consumption by 150 calories, there's little rise in their diabetes risk, but if those 150 calories come from a can of soda, their increase in diabetes risk is huge?
We've computed that in our country, in America, our current average consumption of sugar, which you rightly said was 19 teaspoons per day, increases our risk for diabetes by 68%.
Which is staggering, and I'm thinking about children right now. I mean, and kids we have something called type 2 diabetes. That's, of course, the most common form of diabetes by far. It used to be called adult onset diabetes because it occurred in adults. It didn't occur in younger people, but it does now. In fact, although teens with type 2 diabetes used to be unheard of, and we called it adult onset diabetes. Now, a third of all new cases of type 2 diabetes in the U.S. are in teens.
Exactly. This is a disease that had never occurred in children. I started my medical schooling in '76 and became a intern in 1980, and we had never heard of pediatric type 2 diabetes. In fact, I actually went into pediatrics originally to stay away from chronic disease. And now that's all I take care of. When you look at the fact that children now get two diseases that had never been seen before, type 2 diabetes and fatty liver disease. If you got fatty liver disease before 1980, there was really only one cause, and it was alcohol. And children don't drink alcohol. So fatty liver disease was unheard of in the pediatric population. Well, a paper that came out in 2006 says that 13% of all children who die from other causes when they're autopsied show fatty liver disease, and of course 38% of obese children, and that is only going up. So when you really think about it in percent increase, this is the biggest epidemic on the planet. Forget influenza, forget HIV, forget the plague. This is the biggest epidemic because it has gone from 0 to basically 1/6 of the world in the span of just 30 years. It is absolutely astounding.
I want to talk a little bit about what's happening to our livers, our children's livers, all of our livers. We know what happens to the livers of alcoholics.
Right.
And we know that sugar is metabolized very similarly to alcohol.
Fructose molecule is.
Yeah, the fructose molecule.
Right.
People don't get arrested for driving under the influence of sugar, but the human liver's metabolism of fructose is remarkably similar to its metabolism of ethanol. Does this mean that fructose is similar to alcohol in how it damages the human liver and how it raises our likelihood of developing associated diseases?
That's exactly what it means. If you look at a liver under the microscope from an alcoholic and from a soda consumer, you can't tell the difference. And we've already done 2 liver transplants on 400-pound, 15-year-old soda drinkers at UCSF. In fact, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease has now overtaken hepatitis B and C as being the primary cause of liver transplant in the United States. And that is now occurring in children. These are diseases we've never seen before. So, if you look at how the fructose molecule is metabolized, it goes straight to the liver because no other organ in the body can metabolize it because no other organ has the transporter to get it in to metabolize it. It overwhelms the pathways that would normally lead to burning, and you end up with liver fat. Plus, it's not insulin regulated, so insulin can't shut it down. So when you consume a soda, you are flooding your liver with excess energy that goes straight to fat. And we now know that that liver fat that is produced from the sugar what happens to the sugar in your liver is what drives all of those other chronic metabolic diseases that we call metabolic syndrome. And, it makes sense that this would be true because sugar and alcohol are metabolized virtually identically. And after all, where do you get alcohol from? Fermentation of sugar. It's called wine. We do it in Napa and Sonoma every day. The big difference between alcohol and fructose is that for alcohol, the yeast does the first step of metabolism called glycolysis. For fructose, we do our own first step. But once the mitochondria in your cells, in your liver, are presented with that excess energy, it only knows one thing to do, and that is take the excess and turn it into liver fat. And the faster that liver fat gets made, the faster it either gets exported, in which case your triglycerides go up, or maybe it doesn't get exported and it precipitates as a lipid droplet, and now you have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the two diseases that we have causation for, heart disease and type 2 diabetes, are both based on what the liver does to sugar in terms of its production of fat.
Well, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, I don't think had even been described until 1980. It is really a recent development, at least our recognition of it is. And we know that for most people, there's a threshold beneath which alcohol seems to be safe and may even provide some health benefits.
That's right.
And there are people, though, for whom alcohol it's not a slippery slope, it's a cliff. And for them, and you find them in AA, and you sometimes find them with serious, very, very serious health problems, the only safe amount of alcohol is 0.
Right.
Do you think that similarly there is a threshold for sugar where beneath that amount would be safe for many people, but that for some people the only safe amount would be something like 0?
Well, I don't know about 0. 0 is probably too strong a number in this case, but each of us has a limited capacity to metabolize fructose. We have the machinery to be able to oxidize it, to basically turn it into energy at a certain point. But different people have different thresholds. And if you go above your individual threshold, your liver has no choice but to turn the excess into fat. And that's where the chronic disease starts. So the question you're really asking is, who are the most susceptible in our society?
Yes.
And who has to be most careful
Yes.
about their sugar consumption? That's what I think you're asking.
Yes.
Okay. There are a couple of things that can increase your rate of sugar metabolism in your liver. One of them is exercise. Exercise increases mitochondria across the board. And mitochondria burn energy instead of allowing it to be stored. And it's true even in the liver. So if you exercise a lot, you can consume a greater amount of sugar before you will reach your upper threshold. So if you are a football player on the gridiron for 3 hours a day and you want to drink a Gatorade, that's fine. That's not a problem. But what if you're not? What if you're a mere mortal like me and you consume that same Gatorade? That excess sugar, which is in the Gatorade, is going to top out your ability to metabolize it, and you're going to drive fatty liver disease. So the question really is, who is the Gatorade marketed to? If it were marketed to athletes, all they'd have to do is basically have the Gatorade, tubs at the sporting events for the athletes. No, the Gatorade and all the energy drinks, if you will, are being marketed to children. To be more like an athlete. Well, the fact of the matter is, there is no energy drink that can make you an athlete. Period.
That's
okay?
for sure.
That's just make that very clear.
I want to talk about kids a little more and obesity. You are an internationally renowned pediatric endocrinologist. You've had a front row seat to the declining health of our children. You've pointed out that we even have an epidemic of obese 6-month-olds.
Obese newborns.
Obese newborns. You're also the co-author of a study that I want to talk about. It was published in the medical journal Atherosclerosis, And I find it quite fascinating. I think it's important. In this study, you found that obese children who cut out sugar from their diets saw enormous improvements in cardiovascular risk factors after only 9 days. And the only change was their sugar intake.
Yes, we did take the added sugar out of their diet, but we knew that the big criticism would be, well, of course you took the sugar out of their diet, they got better, because their calories went down. Their weight would have gone down. So we actually, instead, when we took the sugar out of their diet, we replaced it with starch. We gave them the same number of calories, and we gave them an extra molecule that had the exact same caloric value as did sugar at 4.1 calories per gram. We made sure they didn't lose weight because we sent them home with a scale and had them weigh themselves every day. And we call them up and say, "What'd you weigh?" And if they were losing weight, we said, "Eat more," because we were controlling for calories and we were controlling for weight. What we saw was absolutely remarkable. Not only did all of their cardiovascular parameters get better, all of their other metabolic parameters, including their glucose tolerance, their insulin sensitivity, and their lactate went down. So we fixed their insulin resistance, we fixed their mitochondria, and we fixed their lipids without changing calories and without losing weight. And we did it in 9 days. I mean, think about that.
I've spoken with many physicians in recent years, and almost all of them say they are becoming convinced by the accumulating science that sugar is much worse than they had thought. I see a real change in thinking occurring. The old paradigm said that the problem with sugar was that it provides empty calories and so contributes to weight gain. But the new understanding is that sugar consumption quite directly, and whether you're fat or not, can contribute to heart disease and heart attacks and diabetes and high blood pressure and cancer. One cardiologist told me, and he's a pretty prominent one, he said, and I quote him, "I spent 30 years working as a cardiologist without ever once wondering what impact sugar had on the heart." What would you say to him, Rob, and what would you like him to say to his cardiovascular patients?
Sugar changes heart muscle contractility by causing lipid accumulation in the muscle. So this cardiomyopathy, this heart failure that we're seeing, very well may be related to sugar consumption as well. We don't have the data to prove that yet, but it's certainly looking promising. So this concept that only the liver can metabolize a compound, and when that compound doesn't serve any useful purpose in the body, and when excess consumption of that compound drives different metabolic processes that cause disease. We have a name for that compound. It's called a toxin. That's the definition of toxin. Now, sugar has gotten a free pass because it's calories. And people say, well, you need calories to live. You need energy to live. So here's my question to you. Can you name an energy source which is not food, which is not nutrition, which, when consumed in excess, causes cell and metabolic damage and death, and we love it anyway, and it's addictive? Answer: alcohol. Alcohol is not food. Alcohol is not nutrition. There is no dietitian on the planet who would tell you that alcohol is beneficial or that it is a nutrient. There is no biochemical reaction in any eukaryotic organism on the planet that uses alcohol for energy. Yet, alcohol is considered a toxin. Well, guess what? Sugar meets exactly the same criteria. So we need to look at this molecule in a very different way than we had before. And when you realize that sugar and alcohol are metabolized the same way. And when you realize that a bowl of Fruit Loops and a glass of orange juice constitutes 3 times the amount that children are supposed to have for the whole day, and it's just breakfast, you can see what's happening. Sugar is the alcohol of the child.
We recognize that alcohol is an addictive substance and that people who become addicted to it have very, very serious health problems, social problems. That's widely recognized. Are you saying then that we should start to think about sugar and particularly its excessive use in children in somewhat the same way as we think about alcohol?
I'm saying exactly that. A little is metabolizable, and a little, in general, doesn't hurt unless, of course, you have an addictive personality for that. But a lot does, and a lot hurts in different ways. Now, the reason why alcohol has such a bad rap, of course, is because of the acute effects, because, of the drunken driving. To be honest with you, alcohol did not have that bad a rap until Mothers Against Drunk Driving made it a priority 1. Remember, we had prohibition, and it was a complete non-starter. It ultimately had to be repealed. Addictive substances are addictive. You can know all of the things that this substance is doing to you, your health, your life, your family, your community, and your society, and you are powerless to do anything about it. That's the definition of addiction. You know in your conscious mind what's going on, but you can't control it. It controls you. Well, the same thing is happening to sugar in children, and all you have to do is go to the grocery store and watch the kids have the temper tantrums in the aisles when their parents don't buy them the sugared cereals, which are at their eye level.
Well, one of the ways that sugar harms us has to do with belly fat. The human body needs some fat to store energy and for other purposes, but we have a problem with abdominal or visceral or big belly fat, as it can be called.
Well, we think liver fat is even more important. Yes, visceral fat is bad. No argument. What drives visceral fat? Answer: stress. Stress drives visceral fat because cortisol drives visceral fat. What drives liver fat? Sugar. Sugar drives liver fat. And liver fat drives hyperinsulinemia, and hyperinsulinemia drives all of the chronic metabolic diseases. So the question is, which one is more fixable? The visceral fat with stress reduction, or the liver fat with sugar restriction? The problem is fixing people's response to stress is extraordinarily difficult. But you could take the sugar out of people's diets and get their liver fat down, and you wouldn't even have to ask them to do anything. All you'd have to do is get the food industry to comply. That's our goal.
Oh, that's all you'd have to do.
That's all we have to do.
As if that was a simple thing. Well, I want to ask you about insulin resistance for a moment. It's a hallmark of metabolic syndrome. And whatever organ becomes insulin resistant, then that organ will manifest its own metabolic syndrome, in effect.
Exactly right.
When you have insulin resistance of the liver, you end up with type 2 diabetes. When you have insulin resistance of the brain, you end up with Alzheimer's disease. When you have insulin resistance of the kidneys, you end up with chronic renal disease. The point I'm trying to make is that all of these conditions typically arise from insulin resistance. So
I completely agree.
The question I want to ask you, Rob, is what causes insulin resistance in the first place?
So you have to understand how insulin works. Insulin has one receptor, the insulin receptor. It binds to that receptor and then transduces two separate signals the liver and in the muscle. The first signal we call the metabolic signal. The transcription factor is called AKT. And virtually all of the things that AKT controls are, for the most part, beneficial. It basically causes cells to utilize glucose. It causes liver glucose output to go down, which therefore keeps your blood sugar low. It activates the enzymes that cause de novo lipogenesis, that is, fat making to try to export the fat out of the liver as triglyceride, in order to keep your liver healthy. So AKT is kind of a good thing. But the second pathway that insulin stimulates, which is called MAP kinase, is not so good. And what MAP kinase does is it causes cell division, because insulin is a growth factor. Insulin causes cells to divide. And when it causes muscles to divide, it causes vascular smooth muscle hypertrophy, which then puts you at risk for coronary artery disease. It can cause breast cells to hypertrophy, which can then ultimately lead to breast cancer, and a host of other phenomena throughout the body where excess insulin drives long-term degenerative and or chronic disease and or cancer and or dementia, like you mentioned. Well, the only goal is to get the insulin down. You got to get the insulin down. And that is what we do in our clinic at UCSF every single day. Our clinic is an insulin reduction clinic to try to improve insulin sensitivity. Now, the low-hanging fruit of improving insulin sensitivity is get rid of the sugar. Why does sugar cause insulin resistance? Well, because sugar is metabolized to fat, and that fat drives that insulin resistance. In addition, there are specific transcription factors that are turned on by fructose in the liver that actually interfere with insulin signaling directly at the receptor and at the substrate that comes after the receptor called IRS1. So everything about sugar makes insulin resistance. And so when we get sugar down in kids' diets, their insulin resistance reverses. And we've shown you can see the effects in 9 days.
I'm hearing you say that getting the insulin down and improving insulin sensitivity is critically
paramount.
Important, and that getting the sugar reduced or out of the diet is the number one way to do that. Is it also important to get more fiber in the diet to improve insulin sensitivity?
Absolutely. And there's a reason for that. So everyone's heard of the microbiome by now. It's, the hottest word around. I think it even made word of the year for Webster's a year or two ago. So the microbiome is your bacteria. So here's how you need to think about this. You consume 160 calories in almonds. Okay? I love almonds. Consume 160 calories in almonds. How many of those calories do you absorb? Turns out only 130. What happened to the other 30? Where'd they go? Turns out the 130 got metabolized up high in the duodenum, but the 30 didn't, because the fiber in the almonds, both soluble and insoluble, formed a gel on the inside of the duodenum, on the inside of the upper intestine, which acted as a secondary barrier. And so those calories did not get absorbed early on. Therefore, it didn't cause the glucose spike. It didn't have to be handled by the liver. It didn't drive an insulin response because they're still in the intestine. So the food moves further down the intestine to the jejunum, the next part of the intestine. And what lives there? Well, the microbiome. That's where the microbiome is. Why isn't the microbiome in the duodenum? The answer is because the pH just changed because of the stomach. The stomach contents are pH 1. No bacteria except H. pylori can live in pH of 1. And the sphincter of Oddi, which is where the pancreas exits into the intestine, is kind of in the mid-duodenum. And so basically, it doesn't mix with the food contents until the jejunum, and that's where the bacteria are. So those 30 calories in the almonds that you didn't absorb in your duodenum because of the fiber went to the jejunum, and then the bacteria got it. So even though you consumed it, you didn't absorb it. Therefore, you didn't get it. When you fed yourself those almonds, you didn't just feed yourself. You fed your bacteria. And that's a good thing to do, because your bacteria are, a host, of hundreds, even thousands of different species. So when you feed your bacteria, you're allowing the fragile bacteria to sort of offset the bad bacteria, what's known as microbial diversity. And that's associated with metabolic health by keeping the bad bacteria at bay. So when you consume food with fiber, you're not getting all the calories you ate, which is why a calorie is not a calorie, because you only measure what you ate, what passed your lips. What you really need to measure is what passes your intestine, and we don't have any rational way of doing that. But knowing that 25 to 30% of the calories you consume actually go to your bacteria means the calories are crap.
Does it also mean that, I'm thinking about the difference between soluble and insoluble fiber?
Well, they're both important.
They're both important.
And most real food has both. So for the audience, soluble fiber is like pectins, like what holds jelly together. Insoluble fiber is like the stringy stuff in celery, the cellulose, the green stuff. Most real food that has not been processed contains both forms. And what happens is, think of the hair catcher on your bathtub drain. It's a little plastic doohickey that has holes in it, right? And when you take a shower, the hair gets caught on the drain, plugs the holes, and then you have to clean it, in order for it to catch hair again, and allow the water to go down in the bathtub. So the insoluble fiber forms the lattice work like the plastic, and the soluble fiber forms, plugs those holes like the hair does. And so what you end up with when you have both is an insoluble barrier, and that's good, and that's what you want to happen. Now, the food industry has caught on to this fiber craze, and so what they're doing is they're adding soluble fiber only back to food.
Like psyllium.
Like psyllium, exactly, and other forms as well. Inulin and other forms of soluble fiber. The point is that you can't make that lattice work without the insoluble fiber, and no one's figured out how to add insoluble fiber back to food yet.
So it means we should get our fiber from food.
That's right. That's what it means.
Well, it seems to me that fiber...
real food.
It's sometimes called roughage or bulk, but it's a really misunderstood weapon in our nutritional arsenal.
I think fiber is the key to the kingdom. I think that fiber is the thing we are not getting. And people think fiber is what you throw in the garbage after you juice the orange. As far as I'm concerned, the fiber was the reason to eat the orange in the first place.
Wow, well...
You have to rethink, what you're doing.
Rob, I want to shift a little bit. Typically, you're obviously a scientist. Typically, scientists see their role as generating data and researching issues, and then most scientists more or less expect that our public health officials and our elected officials will use that data and those research findings to improve the public good in some way. And maybe that was once the case, but it really isn't now for many reasons, most of them involving money.
Yes.
Do you think at this point that some scientists need to get involved in public policy issues and even legal challenges?
Absolutely. I entered medicine back in the ivory tower era, where the scientists did the science and then the public policy makers used that science to advance specific social agendas. That's what used to happen. That stopped about 40 years ago. And there are many reasons why it stopped, but most of them having to do with money, as you said, having to do with payoffs to individual congressmen and other local officials to ignore the science because whatever that science was generating was not good for their industry. That's basically what has happened. Jeremiah Stamler, the father of cardiovascular epidemiology, famously said once, "If a scientist is not willing to follow his data into the policy arena, who will?" I took that very personally. I also took personally a statement made at an Indian public health forum back about 10 years ago called the Hyderabad Statement, which says all significant public health changes involve and require the use of law. And that's why I went to law school. I went and got a master's in law at University of California, Hastings College of the Law, so that I understood what public health law was about, what it could do, what the obstacles were, what the legal doctrines were. And we are figuring out how to apply those doctrines to fix this obesity, diabetes, fatty liver disease, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome pandemic. And it's working.
A number of our speakers in this and our other Food Revolution summits, including Mark Bittman and Michael Pollan, have been quite vocal about calling for a national food policy. And that's one of our goals here at the Food Revolution Network, too, is a national food policy. Your nonprofit, the Institute for Responsible Nutrition, is participating in that discussion. Can you tell us about the Institute and its projects?
Yes, well, we have lots to announce as well. We have just merged with a like-minded nonprofit known as the United States Healthful Food Council. And so IRN and USHFC have now merged to form a joint entity, which is now known as Eat Real. And Eat Real, the real part is in capitals because it's an acronym. It stands for Responsible Epicurean and Agricultural Leadership. When we read through their mission and their strategies, it was exactly ours. What they had developed was a scoring system and a labeling system for restaurants called Real Certified. And again, Real being the acronym. And you can see it in certain restaurants around the country even today. And you'll note it with a green fork in the center of the logo. And so we were developing exactly the same thing for packaged foods. A front-of-package label that would tell people in the grocery store, what's in this package can't kill you because it's real. And we are having those discussions with various states, various departments of health. For instance, the state of Tennessee has already signed on. We will be approaching another state very, very soon. And we hope to basically make this something that people will want, because it's ultimately good for them. And we already know that certain restaurants want it because they can then distinguish themselves from their competitors. And people who are, interested in caring for themselves and caring for their health will actually frequent those restaurants.
And this will give them an easy tool to be able to identify which foods are actually caring for their health and which ones are not.
That's the idea. Since we can't expect anything from Washington, because, after all, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is just the mouthpiece of the food industry, and the FDA is the mouthpiece of the drug industry. This is going to have to come from another venue. And ultimately, Washington is going to have to be dragged along kicking and screaming, which means we have to create the demand for it at the local level, and that's what we're doing.
Well, it's what we're doing here, too, at the Food Revolution Network, and why we feel such an alliance with you and respect for what you're doing. It's one of the central tenets of the work we do that food should confer wellness, not illness. Rob, I want to thank you for being one of our most trustworthy leaders and guides in the food revolution.
Hey, I'm a pediatrician. Our children are our future. And if our children are getting sick, we have no future.
I once saw a child wearing a T-shirt that said, "If you love me, don't feed me junk food."
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you for being with us today, Rob, and thank you for your leadership in so many ways, and thank you for being with us of the Food Revolution.
Oh, it's my pleasure, John. Really, pleasure to talk with you.
We've been talking with pediatric endocrinologist and public health advocate Dr. Robert Lustig, board member of the United States Healthful Food Council, which you can find at eatreal.org, and author of Fat Chance, The Hidden Truth About Sugar, Obesity, and Disease. Dr. Lustig, your research is thorough and your findings are profoundly significant. We want to thank you for your advocacy, for your brilliant leadership, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Well, thank you for your advocacy and your leadership and your partnership as well. This is a global problem, and it's going to take all of us to solve it.
Indeed it is, and we're doing it together.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Robert Lustig and to my dad and colleague, John Robbins, for that extraordinary and deeply informative conversation. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcast page. Make sure you refresh the comments using the refresh button so you can see the most recent ones that have been submitted. Our next presentation will be an interview with the 16th Surgeon General of the United States and the former Director of the Centers for Disease Control, Dr. David Satcher. It will start at the top of the hour in about 17 minutes. And now I'm going to respond to some of the comments that have been shared and offer some reflections and answer a few questions as well. We heard from Hules Buell, who said, "With a kid going into kindergarten this coming year, I am horrified by all the sugar in the foods they offer, the soda machines, and all the people who think they're doing nice things by bringing bags full of sugary sweets with chemical dyes and toxic ingredients. It makes me want to homeschool. We didn't have all this junk when I was a kid. You had a drinking fountain full of, guess what? Water. Free water. Of course, that's also full of hormones, heavy metals, and pharmaceuticals at this point. What are we doing to ourselves?" Well, Hules, thank you for sharing that sadness and that fear. And, I'm a dad. We have twins. And, it can be hard bringing kids into this world, looking at how toxic our world has become, how contaminated with so many chemicals and so many poisons, and the amount of sugar that is seen as normal. It's gone up so much in the last century. The average American consumes over 60 pounds of added sugar per year. It's gone from being a flavoring to being a major source of calories. And as a father, I always ask, what is my responsibility for protecting my kids from dangers? We of course want children to be able to be in the world, to have friends, to interact. We don't want to try to live in some kind of a bubble, right? At the same time, we want to protect them from harm. And I think every one of us has to ask that, not just about kids, but about ourselves. How do we live in this world? How do we live in a toxic food culture and yet try as best we can to be instruments of change? Try to live in integrity with our values and try to make the contribution that we can. The reality is that you can make a bigger difference living in the world and interacting with people than you would if you were, growing some biodynamic farm off in the middle of the wilderness somewhere and never saw another human being. So we all have to find our path and what's right for us. But I honor your journey and your inquiry, and I want to support you in protecting your kid as they move into kindergarten from dangers, and also to the best of your ability informing them so that as your child becomes capable of understanding, they also become able to be an agent of their own self-protection. We heard from Heidi Larson, who said, "I have such a lump in my throat about the comment, sugar is alcohol for a child. I have a 6-year-old little girl, and although I pack her a healthier lunch than what she would be offered, the amount of candy or sugar in the flavored milk that the school provides is heartbreaking. The culinary department teachers in the school that I work with have no idea about this information. It makes me so sad, scared, and heartbroken. I want to share all this information by shouting it from the rooftop. I hope the information in this summit becomes the norm before my little girl gets to middle school, if not sooner." Yes, Heidi, I join you in wanting to shout it from the rooftops and wanting to share it as effectively as possible. And I feel that frustration because obviously the people in the culinary department are probably just trying to make kids happy and do their job and working within a tight budget, and they don't know that they may be poisoning the children in their care. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for packing your girl lunch. Thank you for doing what you can. School lunches is one of the places we can have an influence. Whether or not you're a parent, although especially if you're a parent or a grandparent with a child in school, you can reach out to local school principals or school board members or superintendents, and you can ask to speak with them or speak with school food service directors about what they're doing to implement healthy eating programs. Most of them will say that they care and that they're trying. So try to understand, what are the struggles they face, what are the obstacles they face, and can you give them a nudge, and can you mobilize other parents in the community to speak up and organize to make a difference. We heard from Vika Stat, who said, "Thank you very much for all your work. Shocking information about the pediatric chronic diseases. Being an ICU nurse and watching adults dying from non-alcoholic liver diseases, it breaks my heart for the new generation of children who are addicted to sugar. This information should be all over the news, and more people need to know it. This is so important. Thank you again." Well, thank you, Vika, for your work as a nurse and helping to care for people. We all do the best we can, right, to spread this information and to support people. And some of us, like you perhaps, are helping to care for people who are suffering from the symptoms of a toxic food culture. And of course, others of us are working as best we can to keep people from ending up in that hospital in the first place. We heard from Karen Nacella, who said, "I am an aspiring health and wellness coach and healed myself from cancer naturally and nutritionally. My sister is obese and addicted to sugar. I've tried to help her and provide her with resources. I think Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson's program is the answer to help her, as the emotional piece of it is critical for her to change. I want all of my family to learn more about healthy living. Thank you for this summit." Yes, Karen, thank you so much for sharing that. I hope it is able to support your sister. Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson's work has helped so many people. And one of the critical things is that it takes away some of the judgment. A lot of people feel so ashamed that they do not feel empowered and the author of their own food, lives, and choices and destinies. And I think Susan Peirce Thompson's work helps to take away some of the shame around that, so we can understand that it's not our fault if we've been addicted. We just have to understand that there's actually systems in place that pull us in this direction. And when we understand that, we can make other choices. We heard from Laura Solomon, who said, "Does everything you are saying about sugar hold for not only processed forms, but also with fruits? What about other sources like honey, maple syrup, or erythritol?" Well, Laura, I discussed this a couple days ago, and I will recap briefly now because I think this is important and probably on a lot of people's minds right now. I shared that the best sweets are whole foods in their natural state, and this includes fruits, dates, berries. They come with fiber, vitamins, and minerals, and they're often associated with positive health outcomes in medical studies. But when you start refining and processing to make things sweeter and to remove the fiber and the other natural components, it all changes. So when you distill the sap of the maple tree into maple syrup, or when you juice sugar cane and then dehydrate that juice to make sugar, or even when you juice apples for apple juice, you are creating a product that has lost some, or in some cases all, of its original nutrients. You've removed the fiber that helps to slow down the rate of absorption, and what you've created is essentially an added sugar product. Now, not all added sugars are equal. Maple syrup and raw honey and even dehydrated cane juice have nutrients that you won't find in high fructose corn syrup or certainly in artificial sweeteners. And of course, as we're hearing today, not all people have the same level of sensitivity. So for a lot of people, putting a dash of maple syrup in their tea or coffee is completely not going to cause problems. For other people, it's a very big deal. But as a general guideline, my take on the medical research is that it behooves all of us to eat whole, real, natural foods and to steer clear of the refined sweeteners. Now, we've also had quite a few people asking for more insight on diet sodas. So let me address those for a moment. As we know, diet sodas are carbonated beverages, and instead of sugar, they are sweetened with artificial sweeteners like aspartame, saccharin, or sucralose. Almost every popular sugar-sweetened beverage on the market right now has a light or a diet version, like Diet Coke, Pepsi Max, or Sprite Zero. And these drinks are calorie-free, which technically you would think would help people lose weight and would prevent sugar-related diseases like metabolic syndrome and diabetes. But the evidence for these beverages having a positive influence on human health is actually completely non-existent. The metabolic syndrome, for example, is a group of risk factors for disease that often occur together, and they raise your risk dramatically of diabetes, stroke, and also heart disease. It's defined as having at least 3 of the following symptoms: abdominal obesity or belly fat, high fasting glucose levels, high triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, and or elevated blood pressure. In a study that was published in the journal Circulation that followed 9,500 people for 9 years, drinking artificially sweetened beverages was associated with a 34% increase in risk of developing the metabolic syndrome. Another study found a 36% increased risk of metabolic syndrome and a drastically increased risk of diabetes in diet soda drinkers. Now, some people ask about stevia, and I'll be honest with you, there isn't really a lot of data on stevia yet. But I do believe that, and we do believe, and studies indicate that, like artificial sweeteners, it can still trigger the brain's sweetness receptors, and that the body prepares itself for the influx of calories that come from sugar when you consume stevia. The pancreas still releases insulin, which breaks down sugar, but when that sugar doesn't come, the body's metabolism still craves the calories it expects, and it goes looking for them, often from other foods. Research has found that people who consume more sugar-free sweeteners tend to eat more calories overall, which can make them heavier. And as far as we know, this dynamic is true for stevia as well. We heard from Martha Byrnes, who said, I have been a BLEer, that means Bright Line Eater, which is Susan Peirce Thompson's program, since October 2016, beginning with a boot camp. I have noticed that when I have crossed my lines, by which she means when she's crossed the bright lines and she's eaten the foods that she's trying to say absolutely no to in the Bright Line Eating program, depression sets in. I become unmotivated. I don't leave my house, and my saboteur becomes very vocal. When I eat true to BLE, I feel amazing. I feel energy. I go to the grocery store and run errands, and my brain thinks beautifully from my higher self. It is hard to break the need, the desire, the wants, and the urges. I am a 10 on the susceptibility scale. I have crossed my lines. I do resume one day at a time. One day at a time. Well, thank you, Martha, for sharing this and for sharing your struggle. And we wish you strength. We wish you clarity in your journey. And we wish you health. And we wish you the ability to draw your bright lines and to adhere to them and to keep returning to them time and time again. And I look forward to hearing your success story as time goes along here. And now we have a pre-recorded bonus message from one of the people whose lives have been touched by the food revolution. This is a businessman turned food activist named Eran Zahavi from Los Angeles, California.
My name is Eran Zahavi. I'm 34 years old, and I'm an early partner in a startup technology company. I am very healthy and energetic. I love eating healthy food. My wife loves that about me and my diet and my choices, although that wasn't always the case. Up until a couple of years ago, I was pretty uninformed about the impact of my food choices and was eating a standard American diet. And my wife was putting up with it, but it was a bit of a strain for us because I ate a lot worse than she did. And although I didn't know it at the time, it was actually a big strain for my body. So I discovered the Food Revolution Summit, and it couldn't have come at a more perfect time. I was about to become a dad. My company was growing pretty fast, and I would need more energy than I ever did. And lo and behold, I was able to find that through the change in my food choices. So with the Food Revolution Summit, I got a lot of the insights that I needed, and they came from trusted experts, which was great because I was able to get onto a healthier path. Now my wife and I are aligned with our food choices, and we're excited that we can raise our child in a healthy home, and we know what best to feed him as well as ourselves. And with my own personal choices, I found that my energy levels increased, my mental clarity increased, and that's been good for every aspect of my life, whether it's my business or my family or just my personal life. And the great benefit of the summit was that I could share what I learned with my friends and coworkers. And it wasn't just by me telling them what I had learned, but with the empowerment package, I could lend them CDs, I could email them transcripts, or whatever they were looking for. I had a resource to point them in the right direction. Amazingly, really, the food revolution has not only been good for me, but it's been great for my family. It's been great for my professional life. It's great for my health. And it's been really amazing for the people around me, my friends and my colleagues. And I'm just really grateful to have this information at hand. Not only did I learn it, but I can continue to go back to it and I can continue to share it. And most importantly, beyond changing my own habits, I have the opportunity to share it with the people that I love.
Thank you so much to Eran Zahavi for applying this in your life and also for sharing it with the people that you love. We all have people we love, and as we become informed and empowered with this life-saving information, we want to tell them about it, don't we? We want to share it and spread it. And the empowerment package is one way of doing that. It's one way of owning it more deeply and having it in your possession for life. So if you're inspired to invest in our work and to invest in your health, it's a great resource. And that reminds me, now is the time for this segment's Empowerment Package giveaway, which goes to David Palakios. David said, I am 17 years old and I've been actively participating in the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension 4-H Youth Program for 8 years. I've been my club's food and nutrition project leader. I aspire to become a food scientist and want to learn more about the science of foods. I have worked with nutritionists, dietitians, and food scientists to help me teach youth about what kinds of foods they should eat and not eat in order to maintain a healthy life. I have been listening for the past few days during the summit, and I've learned so much and would love to listen again and again, especially to Dr. Lustig's interview. Is there any way I can listen to these interviews again? Well, yes, David, absolutely. You can listen to them anytime or place you want for the rest of your life. You'll have the transcripts as well, along with source links when studies are cited. Even Spanish translation if that's relevant for you. So excited to share it with you. Our team will be in touch. Congratulations. And congratulations also to all of the recent new Empowerment Package owners: Maria from New Jersey, Maurice from Greece, Gail from Florida, Donald from Sweden, Jean from Pennsylvania, Sue from Michigan, Nikki from Canada, Dan from Ohio, and Alphonse from Belgium. Coming up next, starting in another minute or so, we're going to have an interview with one of the most esteemed doctors in the history of the United States, Dr. David Satcher. It isn't often that someone as deeply integral to the medical establishment as Dr. Satcher joins in a summit on building a food revolution. Dr. Satcher served as the 16th Surgeon General under both President Clinton and President Bush. Having served in administrations representing both Democratic and Republican leadership, and having also served as director of the Centers for Disease Control, we feel that Dr. Satcher brings a unique perspective and a wealth of insight. That said, given his history in politics and in public policy, the interview is likely to go into some terrain that might generate some disagreement among summit participants. And we don't ask you or expect you to necessarily agree with everything Dr. Satcher says, or for that matter with everything any of our speakers say, or everything that we say. What we hope is that this conversation will illuminate and that it will be stimulative, informative, and empowering. We hope it will be useful to you and help to provide a bigger picture perspective on where we are as a society, and of course, on how we can end the obesity epidemic forever. And now it's time for us to move to the next segment of our broadcast, an interview with Dr. David Satcher. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. David Satcher. Dr. Satcher is a physician, a public health administrator, and a renowned champion for eliminating racial and ethnic disparities in health and for achieving healthy lifestyles through physical activity and through good nutrition. Dr. Satcher served as the 16th Surgeon General of the United States and the 10th Assistant Secretary for Health in the Department of Health and Human Services. He's also served as director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In 2006, Dr. Satcher established the Satcher Health Leadership Institute at the Morehouse School of Medicine. The institute is working to improve public health policy and to eliminate health disparities for disadvantaged groups. So now, Dr. Satcher, my dad and I feel so grateful for your decades of service, and we're so deeply honored to have you with us. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Dave, for being with us. We really appreciate your wisdom and the opportunity to share it with our audience.
I'm delighted to be able to join you, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. Well, I'm thinking back. The first official report from the Office of the Surgeon General was the landmark report issued in 1964 by then Surgeon General Luther Terry that dealt, of course, with tobacco and health. Prior to that, there had been a great deal of debate about whether smoking was safe or harmful, and 43% of Americans smoked. Today, 18% of Americans smoke. At least 8 million lives have been saved, and now nearly everyone recognizes the very serious health hazards from smoking. David, when you were Surgeon General, you issued one of the other great landmark Surgeon General's reports, this one on overweight and obesity. One of the things that strike me about your report is that although obesity is not an infectious disease, you called it, and I think quite rightly, an epidemic. What led you to use that term, epidemic?
Well, as you know, as director of the CDC, I had worked with a lot of people who had been involved with infectious diseases. And so you're right. We usually have reserved that term, epidemic, for infectious diseases that were increasing rapidly throughout the population. But then when we looked at this whole issue of overweight and obesity, especially among children, we saw that between 1980 and 2000, there had been a tripling of overweight and obesity. So that certainly meets the definition of an epidemic, anything that increases that rapidly. And so we felt comfortable, when I say we, I'm including the top scientists at the CDC. I was with one of them earlier this week, Bill Dietz. We felt comfortable in calling it an epidemic.
Well, your wording and your warning was prophetic. Obesity has now come to rival tobacco as the leading preventable cause of disease in this country. One would hope that physicians, along with other healthcare providers, would educate patients and potential patients about the importance of good nutrition and regular physical activity. But we have a disease-oriented healthcare system. Now, you have noted some years back that physicians could not be reimbursed for time spent helping patients lose weight because obesity was not defined as a disease. David, in the years since you said that, has obesity been formally considered a disease for the purpose of physician reimbursement?
Well, yes, and I think the Affordable Care Act also has made it much easier for physicians to be appropriately reimbursed for time spent with patients, preventing complications of diseases. Now, the Medicare, for example, certainly rewards physicians who can demonstrate that their patients' diabetes or obesity or what have you has improved, and that they are, in fact, controlling the disease and giving the patient a better outcome. So we've come a long ways in terms of reimbursing patient care for outcomes and not just numbers of times that the physician sees the patient. It's a big difference in terms of being able to look at the quality of outcomes of interaction and to reward physicians for that, as well as the fact that they saw the patient.
So there has been progress on that front. I know that eliminating health disparities has always been a priority for you. We still have enormous disparities in access to health care, in quality of health care, and in access to good food and in access to healthy environments. The Republican-led Congress has vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. David, what has the Affordable Care Act meant to communities of color and to anyone in underserved communities and to rural communities as well?
Well, I think that the Affordable Care Act has really brought us to a new level of healthcare responsibility, and I would say caring. There are 20 million people who are now covered because of the Affordable Care Act. We have dramatically decreased the percentage of the uninsured in this country to the lowest level in our recent history. It's made a big difference. But more important than that, and we don't talk about it enough, it's also changed the way we approach patient care. For example, as you know, there was a time just recently when patients would not be insured if they had a pre-existing conditions, whether it was a mental health problem or diabetes or what have you. And so many families faced a situation where they couldn't get insurance for children with disabilities, and I'm including in that mental health problems or obesity, but pre-existing conditions meant that people had trouble getting insurance coverage. The Affordable Care Act changed all of that. The Affordable Care Act made mental illness a health service essential. In other words, it said it is essential that people get health care for mental disorders. And again, the number of families that have benefited from that is just amazing. So there were a lot of good things that came out of it. The fact that children can stay on their parents' insurance until the age of 26 has made a tremendous difference in coverage. Millions of people being able to keep their coverage, whereas they would have lost it. So a lot of good things about the Affordable Care Act. I think the Affordable Care Act is the kind of thing that needs to continue to be reformed and improved. And I think that should be our attitude, is that where can we find areas for improvement? But nobody can argue that when it comes to coverage and access or even sensitivity to the plight of people and families, the Affordable Care Act has moved us forward tremendously. Not perfect, but really, given all that's been accomplished, if we could continue to reshape it and reform it, I think we could have a great health system in this country, healthcare system.
If you had the power to reshape and reform it and help it to improve, what steps would you have us take?
Well, one of the things that I would be most concerned about is the extent to which we are implementing the prevention agenda. I think the prevention agenda was built into the initial proposal as a way of decreasing costs in the health system. And there's a lot of evidence that prevention agenda will do that. It has not been well funded. It has not been supported. There are people who feel that, quote, prevention is an individual responsibility, so the health system should not be involved with that. I totally disagree. I think if we invest in prevention, we're going to decrease the cost of treating diabetes. When I was director of the CDC, and I'll make this brief, we went to Speaker Gendricks about what was going on in the Native American population and all of the people there suffering from end-stage renal disease related to diabetes. And we asked him if he would really help the CDC implement a program that really attacked diabetes from the standpoint of prevention and control as a way of dealing with the end-stage renal disease in the Native American population. Well, about a month ago, the study came out showing that Native Americans now have a lower end-stage renal disease rate than any population in the country. It's right there. The white population is about the same, but the curve has been completely downward in terms of end-stage renal disease for Native Americans. It's one of the most important success stories that we have. But so we need to focus on prevention and control, and in time, that will help to control the cost.
When you talk about prevention, which is clearly an ounce of prevention, it is said, is worth a pound of cure. That's really where we get the most bang for the buck in
Well, at
preventing
the CDC, we used to say an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure.
a ton of cure. I like that.
Yeah,
I like that. Well,
we believe that.
the Obama administration made reducing obesity a priority during its 8 years in office. It created a task force on childhood obesity. It overhauled nutrition requirements in school lunches. It passed requirements for calories to be labeled on menus, and it moved to ban trans fats from foods. But but despite these efforts, obesity rates among adults continued to climb during the Obama years from about 33.7% when Obama first took office to 38% or so when he left. Now, the Republican-led Congress, particularly in the House, wants to revoke the updated nutrition standards for school meals that were championed by First Lady Michelle Obama, and they want the FDA to grant safe status to partially hydrogenated oil and artificial trans fats, moves which would put these decidedly unhealthy fats back into the food supply. David, what I want to ask you is, what do you anticipate will happen to obesity rates in the coming years?
Well, let me just say that there have been a lot of things put in place to combat the epidemic of overweight and obesity. And certainly the work of the First Lady, Michelle Obama, should be greatly applauded. But also the work of schools throughout the country and the way that many schools have changed physical activity. And even though many schools have lost physical education teachers, more and more of them now are finding ways to have children be physically active, even if it means in the middle of a lecture on mathematics, engaging kids in physical activity. It's happening in a lot of places. There are a lot of schools where as soon as kids get off the bus, if you will, they have an opportunity to work out and be physically active. We've seen a lot of progress in terms of children. In fact, at least 31 states have had a reduction in childhood obesity. The Child Health and Nutrition Act of 2010 changed what the Department of Agriculture could send to schools for free meals, making those meals more healthy than they had been in the past. Things like this are on the way that I think are making a difference. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation set aside $500 million of its funding to combat childhood obesity. The Action for Healthy Kids program, which I started, is really making a big difference in many schools and communities. So there's a lot going on, and we're seeing a change. There are some social determinants of health that are a real problem here, and you remember probably I served on the World Health Organization's Commission on Social Determinants of Health. And specifically to overweight and obesity, I would say that there are some people who live in communities where there are no safe places to play and be physically active, where they're not comfortable getting up and going out for a walk in the morning, which some of us take for granted. There are some communities in which there's no grocery store nearby that sells fresh fruits and vegetables, and therefore giving them access to good nutrition. I think, again, that's where the Affordable Care Act was trying to head, was to really get us to the point where we view the social determinants of health, housing, income, safety, especially because there are some communities not safe enough for people to be physically active. Some communities don't have access to parks that are safe. So I think those are the areas where we have to do much more. So I'm hoping that we will be able to continue on that road.
Well, I am hoping that with you, and I know a lot of our listeners are too. When you mentioned schools, I was thinking about that not all parents are equal in their ability to educate or model healthy behaviors, such as physical activity and good nutrition for their kids. David, do you see it as a responsibility of schools to create environments that are conducive to helping children develop lifetime habits of physical activity and good nutrition?
Most definitely. I think it's a part of learning, and I think it's one of the best investments that we can make. If you would allow me to put one plug in for the Satcher Health Leadership Institute,
Please.
we have 3 leadership development programs. One is a health policy programs for physicians and other health professionals. One is for community health leaders like mayors and to learn how to attack health problems at the community level. My favorite program is the Quality Parenting Program. We take about 100 parents a year, and what they learn is how to enrich the development of children between 0 and 5. We take that for granted. Now, 80% of the parents in our community are single parents, but they want to be good parents. And what we find is that when we partner with them, they are really excited about the opportunity to be better parents in terms of the healthy development of their children. And NIH has looked at that program and recently funded us to replicate it in 12 states. So I think we ought to invest in helping parents to be better parents, especially when it comes to how and when the brain develops, the impact of early communication, the impact of good nutrition. So there are a lot of things that we could change, because some things that happen to children are virtually irreversible in terms of the rest of their lives. So I think we ought to invest more in those early years and in supporting parents who want to be better parents.
There are many health authorities saying today that banning, or at least greatly reducing, the advertising of junk food that's targeted at kids would be the single policy measure that would be the most effective in reducing the rates of childhood obesity. All too often, parents are fighting a losing battle if their kids are being constantly bombarded with advertising which promotes fast food and unhealthy foods. Children have for a long time been the targets of junk food ads, and these occur alongside their favorite TV programs. But now we have modern digital technology, and it allows customized advertising, and the issues become more insidious. Facebook ads for junk food pop up on smartphones. Ads for high sugar snacks pop up at moments of heightened excitement when a child is playing an online game. David, do you agree with those who say that reducing or banning ads targeting kids by companies selling unhealthy food and drinks should be one of our top priorities if we're going to bring down the obesity rate?
I do, and I know that it's not difficult to implement things like that, because we always try to balance, our concept of freedom and with what we need to do to improve the health of our people. But I do believe that we have a responsibility to protect our children. And I think that includes protecting them from being bombarded by unhealthy messages, if you will. And by the way, we have found that that children in certain communities, and minority communities, are more likely to be bombarded by certain of these messages, less likely to get health messages, less likely to have access to good nutrition, are safe places to play. So when you put all of those things together, you begin to see why the disparity in things like overweight and obesity. I think we as a society have a responsibility to do everything we can to promote healthy messages to children and to understand that there are disparities in health. And some of those disparities relate to disparities in the kind of experiences our children are having at home and in the community.
That's absolutely the case. The health disparities between the wealthy and the poor and between whites and people of color are profound. You've pointed out that more than 83,000 African Americans needlessly lose their lives every year from avoidable differences in the quality and quantity of care. What can you tell our listeners? And actually, if I may, David, what do you tell white audiences to help them to better understand what's taking place?
Well, there's some things that I tell white audiences that are the same things that I tell predominantly black audiences, because some of the messages have to be the same. But I have spent a lot of my career, working with people who were predominantly white and solving global health problems with them. And so when I talk to white audiences, I talk with to them from the standpoint of together we've got to solve. This is not just a problem for black people. I mean, the health challenges black people are facing in this country are a problem for America. And so all Americans ought to be thinking about how can we together improve the health of all people, reduce the rate of overweight and obesity in all people. And many of the people who've listened to me over the years have come to me later and said, I heard you speak and I decided that I wanted to do the following. And then they'll tell me what they're doing to make a difference in our society for blacks and whites and others.
When someone comes to you and says, I heard you, you inspired me, you motivated me, you helped me to see something, and as a result of that, I took these actions. What actions do you want to hear that they took?
Well, I want to hear that they have tried to implement programs to target these problems in whatever work they were doing. They had choices. Many of them sacrifice high incomes in order to work in public health, for example. Not a very high income profession, but makes a great difference when it comes to health outcomes globally, and certainly in this country, but globally. Many people in public health are committed, and they sacrifice in order to carry that out. So I've come to believe that there are good people in all populations, white, blacks, Asian, good people, and I've spent a lifetime finding them to try to do good things together.
Well, we appreciate that very, very much that you've done that and continue to do that. I want to shift our conversation just a little bit to food. And its role in obesity. Today, ultra-processed food, high in sugar, low in fiber, often full of chemicals, makes up 62% of the calories in the American diet. Now, we have government subsidies, and paradoxically, they end up lowering the cost to the consumer of ultra-processed foods. But we pay a very high price for that seemingly cheap food. Healthcare costs are now $3.2 trillion annually in the U.S., of which at least 75% is spent on the diseases that would be prevented if we changed our collective diet. That adds up to more than $2.4 trillion spent every year treating diseases we possibly could prevent. David, what do the American people need to understand in order for this to change?
Well, I certainly think they first need to understand the message that you just gave. Chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, stroke, etc., account for such a large proportion of the diseases that we live with and die from. And they are at least 80% preventable. They are preventable. And so we need to focus more of our attention and more of our resources on preventing these diseases. We have the best healthcare system in the world when it comes to treating diseases once they happen. But the problem is that so many people die needlessly of diseases that could have been prevented. So I think whether you look at it from the standpoint of the economics of care, or whether you look at it from the standpoint of the humanity, we owe it to people to do a much better job of preventing, making sure that people do have the right information about the foods they eat and about physical activity. I have to say, when I first became Surgeon General, I released this prescription. And so on this prescription the first thing was physical activity at least 30 minutes a day, at least 5 days a week. Then we had good nutrition. And the focus there was on fresh fruits and vegetables. There's a lot of debate, as you know, when it comes to nutrition. A lot of areas in which people, you may read a book one day that says you eat more whole wheat grains, etc. You may read a book the next day that says because that turns to sugar, we're eating too much of whole wheat. And so what strikes me there is the need for balance in terms of what we consume. But there's no debate about the physical activity. and no debates about the importance of fruits and vegetables, plant-based foods in the diet. So I think we can know that, but we also have to continue to study nutrition and to try to make sure, especially that our children are exposed to the right foods.
Well, the fast food companies and the junk food companies have their own ideas of what they want to expose children to.
Yeah.
A recent study found that preschool children said that food served to them in McDonald's wrappers tasted better than the exact same food when it was served to them in plain wrappers. I mean, it's clear that the marketing of junk food to kids is effective, and it's playing a significant role in the childhood obesity issue.
Now, we're paying a tremendous price. Yeah.
In order to ward off regulation, companies like McDonald's and Coca-Cola claim that industry self-policing is the answer. David, my question to you is, do we have any reason to believe that industry self-policing is the answer?
Well, I'd say two things. We certainly need more self-policing by industry. History tells us that that's not the answer, that as a society, we certainly owe it to our children to make sure they are exposed to accurate information about nutrition, but also that we have a way of making sure that every child has access to good nutrition. And that's why what happens at the schools is so important, because children come from different types of homes and communities. And some of the parents are in a better position to oversee what their children eat and make sure that they get the right foods. But the reason I push so hard in terms of what happened at school, because for many children, unfortunately, the schools become most important in terms of their nutrition and their physical activity.
Well, I agree with you, and schools can play a tremendous role for good, or in unfortunate cases, in the other direction.
Right.
Some of the ways that fast food companies have insinuated themselves into schools can only be called insidious. I mean, McDonald's is proud of what it calls Teachers' Nights. These are occasions for which McDonald's recruits teachers to work behind the counter and serve burgers and fries and soda to their students and to their students' families. The McDonald's Corporation provides uniforms and branded shirts for teachers to work behind the counters. Now, McDonald's claims these events are fundraisers for the schools, but in reality, McDonald's donates only a very small proportion, in fact, many cases less than 10% of the event's proceeds. It's hard really to avoid the impression that these events are actually designed to use teachers to sell junk food directly to their students in order to create brand loyalty. David, how do you feel when you hear about things like this being done in our schools?
It's frustrating to see what industry can buy. You know, it's money can be used for good, and it can be used for evil or for bad. And we see many examples of the kind that you articulated, where big business uses their position in our society and abuse our children, really. And I guess we're going to have to get to the point of calling it a form of abuse, especially when it leads to children being overweight and obese, and knowing how that affects them now, and that 80% of children who are overweight or obese as adolescents will be that way as adults. So this is without question an assault on the future of our children.
I remember seeing a child wearing a T-shirt that said on the T-shirt, "If you love me, don't feed me junk food."
Wow. Somebody needs to be congratulated for that T-shirt.
Yeah, I thought we should have those widely worn by kids.
Very good.
You know, I found some hope. The Canadian province of Quebec has actually taken a very tough line on food advertising to kids, beginning as far back as the early 1980s. All ads for food products that are aimed at children have been banned from all types of media, from radio, television, the internet, mobile phones, printed materials, signage, promotional material. They really do ban it across the board, and it seems to have really worked. Today, Quebec has by far the lowest rate of childhood obesity in Canada among all provinces. It's just an extraordinary example. David, what's keeping the U.S. from learning from the Quebec example?
Well, it's interesting that the United States and South Africa, and I hesitate to say South Africa because I understand they're trying to reform, are the only two major countries that do not provide health care as a right. In other words, the health system is not viewed as a way to make money, as it is in our country, but as a way to keep people healthy. So everybody has access to care. So I think if we had a system that valued health more than health care, because in our country, I think health care is often too much viewed as a business and as a way for people to make money. The reason for health care should always be as a component of a system to promote health and keep people healthy. So I think our values when it comes to how we view health and health care represent major problems in terms of the way we deal with it. And so when you quote those figures in terms of cost in our health system, it's in great part because we tend to view healthcare as a business more than as a service. And I think if we could get to the point, and we would benefit tremendously if we could reduce overweight and obesity in this country and reduce cancer from smoking or from obesity or what have you, the country would benefit tremendously. But I think now we support business more than we do the country and its future.
When you say how important it would be if we viewed health care as a service rather than a business, I think that many physicians and other healthcare professionals go into this line of work originally because they want to serve, because they want to help people be healthy. But the incentives are so perverse.
Yes.
People working in public health are not reimbursed. Their income, as you mentioned earlier, is very low compared to people in specialties. Primary care physicians aren't reimbursed. Physicians who take Medicaid patients aren't reimbursed very well. There are so many ways that the culture of medicine today seems to, push people in the wrong direction.
Yeah, having been in and around medicine and medical education for such a long time, I can assure you that many and certainly most of the young people who go into medicine go in there because they see themselves being able to provide a service. They want to be healthcare providers, and I think even in medical school, the culture of medicine has an impact which changes attitudes. For some people, it's a big disappointment. For some people, it's a change in their own values in terms of what they want to do. Because, you're seeing role models. And if you're in medical school, most of the role models that you're going to see are going to be specialists. You're going to be taught intentionally or unintentionally that these are the people that you should be trying to emulate. And I think that's a real problem with medical education in this country. And even when we try to make a step forward and say, we're going to create a new group of people like nurse practitioners and physician assistants. And many studies have shown, for example, that nurse practitioners do a better job of controlling hypertension and in many cases diabetes than physicians. The system will not allow them to practice, what they have made a commitment to practice and what they're prepared to do. But I can tell you they have a lot of trouble doing what they've been trained to do and keeping people healthy. And then in the meantime, people wait for hours to see, in some communities, to see physicians because there are so few. And the same thing is true of dentists, by the way. Dental hygienists and others are trained to prevent tooth decay by putting on sealants and things. And yet most states do not allow that practice, independent practice of dental hygienists.
When you mention nurse practitioners, there's also a flourishing development of dental therapists, people
Yes.
who they're not fully trained as dentists. They can't do certain kinds of surgery, for example, but they can provide a lot of the preventive care, a lot of the regular care
Most
at much
definitely.
less cost and be far more accessible if we would create a system that supported that.
That's right. And I believe now there are very few states where dental therapists, and some of those are dental hygienists, by the way, it depends on what they call them in different states, are allowed to practice and to provide care to children that they can't get otherwise. There are a lot of places without dentists, and there are a lot of dentists who will not accept Medicaid, for example, to pay for the care of children. So you have children going without preventive oral health because of the rules about practice.
Well, those rules need to change.
Yeah.
And are there things you would like our audience, the people listening to you right now, to understand or to do to help that to change?
I think there's a major message in terms of our experience as a country and our experience in the world that we should all understand, and that is prevention is in fact much more reasonable and economic than treatment, and as we said again, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. Not just in terms of the cost, but in terms of preventing pain and suffering. And there's so much pain and suffering in our society, much of it unnecessary, not just for the person, but for families. And we see it every day, and we have an opportunity to make tremendous progress in that area, and I hope that we will move to do that. It makes much more sense to do everything we can to keep people healthy than to say, well, if you get really sick, we have the best specialists in the world, and if you have the coverage, you can get that care. So we see people every day suffering unnecessarily, dying unnecessarily, because we didn't put the emphasis on prevention and health promotion.
That we really need to put on it for so many reasons. You were speaking a moment ago about medical education. Today, less than a quarter of the medical schools in the country have even a single required course in nutrition. Of the 130 or so accredited medical schools in the United States, only 4 have a nutrition department. And even while we've been learning more and more about the diet-health connection in the past decades, the amount of nutritional education taught in medical schools has actually been decreasing.
Yeah.
David, what I want you to know is that here at the Food Revolution Network, we want to change this, and we want to see the healing power of whole foods nutrition, plant-based nutrition taught in medical schools. We believe most doctors largely ignore nutrition for the simple reason that they haven't been trained to address it.
Right.
And we're undertaking a campaign. We want to get the National Board of Medical Examiners to include the proven role of whole foods nutrition in preventing and reversing disease in the exams that medical school students must take to become licensed physicians. We think that when the tests require nutritional knowledge, then medical schools will make teaching nutrition the priority that it should be in the first place.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's students know what's supposed to be on the test, and they make sure that they learn what they need to know in order to pass the test. We send a lot of messages in terms of what we require students to know and understand. So if nutrition is not required knowledge, then the students view that as a message that it's not important. So clearly, part of this change has to be a change in medical education, as illustrated by a change in what's required to know in order to become licensed or certified.
David, what do you think would happen if every doctor knew the fundamental role that non-invasive, low-cost, health-building nutrition can play in helping to prevent and even to treat the major health ailments of our times?
Well, obviously, we'd have a major system change because I'm confident that the majority of doctors want to do what's best for their patients. They want to practice good medicine. But so often all of the messages in terms of what's important, as illustrated in how we pay for care, or in the other direction. And again, I think that's one of the most important things about the Affordable Care Act, and that is that we started to reward providers for the quality of the outcome of their intervention. And I think that's a major step forward. We have a long ways to go. But the key word, I think, as I think about the Affordable Care Act, is that incentives. It started to put the incentives in the right place. And we practice to a great extent based on the reimbursements and the incentives that we get for the practice. So I think that's what would happen. I think that you not only do they have to know it, but also we have to make sure they know it's important by the way we reward and reimburse practice.
There is a story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or true, that in ancient China, doctors or the equivalent of doctors, what they had, were paid for keeping their patients well. If their patients got sick, they weren't paid.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that actually was the case, but there's a principle there that's reflected in that I think we really need to understand and incorporate in the practice of medicine today.
Yeah, I think there is certainly a very important principle. The one thing that we worry about, and I'll just throw this in because I basically agree with what you're saying. There are physicians who practice in underserved communities. They take care of patients who have been historically underserved. So their outcomes take longer to be as positive as we'd like them to be. So we have to be careful that we don't reward people for taking care of patients who are healthier than patients who have been neglected for so many years. That's the only catch there, is that we've got to make sure that we reward physicians who go to practice in underserved communities and who are willing to care for underserved population, who might well be sicker, and therefore the outcomes may take a little longer to be positive.
Well, I very much appreciate what you just said, what you added. David, your lifetime commitment to preventing disease and suffering seems to come very profoundly from a lifelong commitment to humanity, to people feeling well and being well and taking care of themselves and each other, and all of us having as healthy an environment, as healthy relationships with each other as possible. And I'm very moved by that. I appreciate it very deeply. You are an icon, obviously, to millions of people, and it has been a privilege and a pleasure to speak with you today and to bring your voice to our audience.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the quality of your questions and discussions. Very pleased to be a part of it.
We've been talking with David Satcher, MD, who has served as Surgeon General of the United States, Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and is the founder of the Satcher Health Leadership Institute at the Morehouse School of Medicine. David, your decades of service and leadership have contributed to the health of millions and have helped to further a more just and a more equitable society for all of us. We're so grateful for your leadership, for your wisdom, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed being with you, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much to Dr. David Satcher and to my dad and colleague, John Robbins, for that incredibly powerful conversation. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcast page. Make sure to refresh the comments using that refresh comments button so you can see the most recent comments that have been submitted. And now I'm going to share some of the comments that have been coming in and respond to a few questions and comments. We heard from Marianne Sloat, who said, "Prevention is key. We have been sold the wrong nutritional advice for years. Our children deserve better. We must keep healthier choices in the school system. We must address food deserts in our communities. I want to help. I want to be a voice of your work. Thank you for this summit. The interviews have relit a fire I had lost touch with. A food revolution is what we need for us, our planet, and all beings on it." Marianne, thank you. We need you. We need your voice. We need your passion. We need your fire. We need your advocacy. Because as we see, the cost from the status quo is immense. But as bad as things are, as bad as things have gotten, that's how much better they can be with the change. That's how much room there is for improvement. And I think the gap between what's possible and what's normal is where we step in. That's our job. That's our call to action. That's our challenge today. With knowledge comes power and responsibility. We're gaining knowledge in this summit, and I thank you for stepping up into your power and your responsibility with it. We heard from Michelle McCarty, who said, "I love that Dr. Satcher advocates a holistic approach to community well-being, inclusive of all peoples, especially the most vulnerable, the importance of balance, and a nutritional education. We are intrinsically connected, and the well-being of one affects us all. I pray we can awaken the decision makers and heal the apathy. Thank you for all your efforts, Food Revolution." Thank you, Michelle. We heard from Alan Miller, who said, "I saw a cartoon that showed a professor teaching first-year students, and on the blackboard was a statement, quote, 'A healthy patient kills repeat business,' unquote. Mainstream MDs are not in the business of healing. They are in the sales arm of Big Pharma." Well, Alan, thank you for sharing, and this is a big concern. Now, I have to say there are a lot of doctors who didn't get into the business of medicine because they wanted to exploit people or because they were interested in the business side. They got into it because they wanted to help people be well. But the institution of medical training today is so biased around treating the symptoms of disease rather than helping people be healthy. And as we just heard, the reimbursement system is all based around disease treatment. That there's this pull, like gravity, that pulls doctors on that path. You know, in the debate about the Affordable Care Act and the insurance industry, the focus keeps being on who's going to pay for it, or maybe on how treatment will be financially managed. And those questions do matter, of course, but it is so rare that we ever see a serious focus on why so many people are getting sick in the first place. And in my honest opinion, that's where we ought to place our major focus. In the United States, for example, we spend more than 19% of our gross domestic product on what we call health care. But we all know that in reality, the vast majority of this has nothing to do with caring for health. In reality, it is more often disease symptom management. As Dr. Satcher said, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. You know, we can complain about the high price of healthy foods, and we do have a perverse system of subsidies in the U.S. and many countries around the world that actually brings down the price of the most unhealthy foods like high fructose corn syrup and factory-farmed animal products. So sometimes eating healthfully can feel costly and like an uphill battle. But let's not forget something here. Cancer is pretty expensive. Alzheimer's is pretty expensive. Diabetes is pretty expensive. Your life and the life of the people that you love is beyond any price. The reality is that when you actually look at the big picture, we can't afford not to commit to healthy eating. We have an opportunity here. We have a choice here. We can step forward with what we're learning, or we can ignore. And I'm so glad that right here and right now, more and more of us are getting informed and getting empowered and stepping forward. And when we do so, we are changing our lives and we are helping to shift the course of history. Heidi Larson said, I was advised by a substitute teacher that works in some inner city schools with the very low income families that the healthy food goes right in the garbage and the kids would rather not eat anything than eat, quote, that crap, unquote. I was saddened by that. I hope that kids that are actually hungry would eat whatever was put in front of them instead of turning away beans or sweet potato fries that would be a far healthier option than the other stuff that gets served. How can this information get to the folks that frequent fast food or purchase juice or candy that they can get cheap from the dollar stores and the like? These kids are completely addicted to this sugar, and there are generations that just don't know any better. Heartbreaking. You know, Heidi, I feel you with that heartbreak. I share it with you. And there is a tendency, and we need to be vigilant about it, to blame the kids or even to blame their parents in these situations, without looking at the larger picture that has made it so. As Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson has shared, even highly educated, highly informed, highly motivated adults can struggle with food addiction and breaking free from it. Even when they know that food is bad for them, certain foods, they continue to be pulled to them and to eat them. So when we are giving our kids who don't know any better this kind of crap, and we're setting them up on a lifetime of addiction, what are we doing to them? You know, a third of our kids are expected to get diabetes in their lifetimes. More than 20% of the children in the United States today have a chronic health ailment, which is more than 5 times what it was a generation ago. We are setting our kids up on a lifelong course of addiction to foods that are leading them to heart disease and diabetes and cancer and obesity and mental dysfunction. And they don't know better. It's our job, all of us who know better, who have this knowledge, to not expose our kids to this crap. I mean, you wouldn't give your kids heroin or cocaine and then blame them for getting addicted, right? But we're doing this with sugar and with a toxic food culture. And of course, when kids have, French fries and hamburgers and broccoli and green beans and they're addicted to the junkier foods, they're going to go there, right? That's why we need to start changing what schools serve. We need to start changing what education is provided. We need to get junk food advertising away from kids. We need to get rid of the vending machines that are putting Coca-Cola on school campuses all over the place. We need to bring back healthy, purified drinking water. And we need to offer healthy food and healthy food education. And we need to make healthy food more accessible and more affordable for everybody. We need to change these perverse systems of subsidies. And we need to help stimulate a real healthy food economy by being leaders of it ourselves. I sometimes say that food 1.0 is about survival. If you can get enough calories to fill your belly in food 1.0, that's success. And for many people in the world, that is the measure of success today, tragically. In Food 2.0, we make the central organizing principle of our food systems into commerce. It makes the buying of selling of foods into its primary operative goal. Baskin Robbins is an example. My own grandfather came up with 31 flavors of ice cream and brought a lot of pleasure and a lot of short-term happiness to a lot of people with all those flavors of ice cream, and made a lot of money doing so. My dad walked away from the Baskin Robbins company and the Baskin Robbins fortune because he wanted to be a stand for what we now call Food 3.0. Food 3.0 is where we make health the central organizing principle of our food systems. And there are plenty of profits to be made in Food 3.0. They just come from healthy foods. We make healthy profits from healthy foods. And we all in the food revolution are stepping into Food 3.0. I thank you for that. We heard from Jean Newton Grover earlier today, who said, my husband had a massive heart attack at 42 years old. The doctor told him he wouldn't make it to 50 if he didn't change his lifestyle. He did good for about 4 months, but he's already slipping back. I couldn't understand how he could risk his life. But I'm going to learn more, thanks to Susan Peirce Thompson. Yes, Jean, my heart goes out to you and to your husband and your whole family. It can be hard sometimes to make these changes. Sometimes when our lives are on the line, that's one of the greatest motivating forces, but even then it can be so difficult. And sometimes understanding the bright lines and the pull of food addiction can be so empowering towards helping us to make changes that we know we want, that our lives may depend on, and being able to actually follow through. And we all have loved ones who don't eat as well as we do, and maybe we want to support them. It can be so painful to watch people who care and who we care about go down paths that we know may trigger large amounts of suffering. If this is the case for you, let me offer a few tips right now. Number 1, share this summit with them. Tell them about it. Invite them to listen in. If they can't join in the summit right now, get the empowerment package and share some of the resources with them at a time that works. Number 2, lead by example. Practice it, model it. Your enthusiasm, your health can be contagious. Next, respect people's choices. Treat them with care and respect, and also ask them to respect your choices. So if they're trying to pull you in an unhealthy direction, ask them if they would please support you in caring for your health. Next, share your results. If you have positive benefits, talk about it, share it, speak about it. Also, get your needs for support met. So if people in your life aren't able to support you on your healthy eating path, know that you do need people who will. So you may need to find some new friends in the mix as well. Or maybe you'll find some right here through this summit who can affirm what you stand for and what you believe in and help you to be true to it. And then also, if you know people who struggle with food addiction, Susan Peirce Thompson's work can be a game changer. So you can just give them the quiz or take it yourself, get to know it, and share it. See what happens from there. We heard from Lisa Fernandez who said, "Thank you so much, John and Ocean Robbins. Another great day with superb speakers. This is my 3rd year with you. When I started 3 years ago, I was just trying to stop eating sugar and lower my blood pressure. I have embraced every author and speaker from that point on and have changed everything in my life. And in an incredible way, little did I know that would prepare me for my cancer diagnosis last summer. I have chosen to do what I feel is right, so I avoided surgery and chemo and radiation and chose food, spirituality, and coffee enemas and juicing are all parts of my healing. I am proud to say that my body is ridding itself of this diagnosis, and I owe the information that I've stumbled upon the last 3 years to the first encounter I had with the Food Revolution Summit. Thank you all so much. I want to share everything I learned with the world. I am grateful. Many blessings to you all." Well, Lisa, we wish you all the best in your journey of healing, and our prayers are with you. Whatever you choose, whether you choose to participate in any conventional treatments or not, we're so glad that you're experiencing such health and that your body is ridding itself of the cancer and that you're stepping into health. And some people find that healthy food choices and healthy lifestyle choices are beneficial whether or not they participate in mainstream conventional treatments. And what's really inspiring for those of us who aren't currently struggling with a cancer diagnosis is that these choices can help prevent it so we never get there in the first place. So thank you all again for learning, engaging, and sharing. And now it is time for our revolutionary recipe of the day with chef extraordinaire Karen Hartglass. Karen is the founder of Responsible Eating and Living, or REAL, and the co-host of our Plant Powered and Thriving online course, which is wildly popular and which we'll be launching in about a month. On each day of this summit, Karen introduces a recipe of the day, which you can find on our broadcast page. And I'm going to hand it now to Karen.
Hey, Ocean. Hi, everybody. We've heard a lot about obesity, sugar, and junk snack foods today. Now, fresh fruit makes an excellent snack food. But what if you want something crunchy and maybe a little spicy? Snack foods don't have to be loaded with salt, sugar, fat, and processed artificial ingredients to be good and good for you. Are you ready for today's recipe? It's another favorite of mine, roasted chickpeas. This is a terrific snack food or easy food to bring with you while traveling or on the go. Unlike snack food you buy in the store, this is a whole food that is sugar-free, gluten-free, full of fiber and nutrients, and is delicious. And unlike most snack foods that are high in sodium and made with unhealthy processed oils, this recipe can be customized to your taste. Munching on roasted chickpeas is a fantastic way to get more legumes into your diet, too. This recipe is a winner, and Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson includes roasted chickpeas in her Bright Line eating plan as a plant-based protein option. The recipe is simple. You take cooked chickpeas, either cooked from dry at home or use the canned variety. Toss them with one of our flavor mixes of herbs and spices or come up with one of your own. Then bake them in the oven. I like baking them long enough so they get really dry and crispy. And if you like croutons on your salad, you might want to try using these roasted chickpeas instead. You can make a lot, double or quadruple the recipe, and serve them in bowls for party snacks. As I mentioned, roasted chickpeas make an excellent travel food, especially when flying. They are light and don't require refrigeration. If you are on a long flight, this is a great energy, high protein food that will keep you going. That's all for now. I'll be back tomorrow with another great recipe.
Thank you so much, Karen. We heard from Chrissy Lee, and this one moved me. Chrissy said, as a Native American who is obese and who has many immediate family members and friends alike who have diabetes and are also obese, my heart goes out to everyone living with these issues. I have been obese since childhood, and I am at the highest weight I have ever been. I live in a northern community in Canada who doesn't have access to a store right now. This makes it difficult to eat healthy, but I am going to eat as healthy as I can now. Quote, an ounce of prevention is worth a ton of cure. It is so true. Prevention is not stressed enough, and is not funded enough. I have been depressed for years because of my weight, and I want to change now. I now know that food consumption and what kinds of foods I nourish my body with is the most important thing I do for myself and my family and friends living with heart disease, obesity, and diabetes. I will do my best to educate my community from this point on. I have to take control of my health, or I won't be alive to see my grandchildren. Thanks, Food Revolution Summit, for giving me hope. Well, Chrissy, thank you for sharing, and thank you for learning and engaging. And you are this segment's Empowerment Package recipient. So we'll be getting you an Empowerment Package because we want to support you and your family and your community on your learning path. You'll have the MP3s and the transcripts for life, and we hope that this package will support you in your highest well-being. Congratulations. And congratulations to all of the new people who are stepping up and getting the Empowerment Package right now. You're investing in our work, you're helping to carry the food revolution forward, and you're also investing in your health and your well-being now, and for your family, and for all generations to come, because we are shifting the course of food history. We heard from Carolyn Yankowski, who said, I love John Robbins' thoughtful interviews and conversations with all the interviewees. And Ocean is always so kind, caring, and informative. Thank you for the superb job you all do in support of this movement. It is so profoundly important. I wish everyone on the planet listened to it. Yes, Carolyn, thank you so much for that acknowledgement and those kind words. We want to share this as widely as possible. So we invite you to help spread the word. Spread the word to your family and your community. They can join in at foodrevolutionsummit.org. There are still many days left in this incredible summit. We are in some ways just getting started. So we're moving now towards the end of day 4 of the Food Revolution Summit. And if you want to express your opinions on the summit so far and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcast page. Make sure you refresh the comments so you can see the latest ones. Now, tomorrow we have a very special day coming up. I hope you'll be joining us at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT. Our focus is the end of heart disease, what you can do to banish the world's #1 killer. We're going to start off with a very special guest. Now, a few years ago, we conducted a survey of our members asking who in all the world they'd most like to hear my dad interview. Who do you think came in first? Ahead of presidents, the most famous celebrities on the planet, world-renowned physicians, and other hugely admired global icons. Who was it? Well, you're going to have to join us to find out, because that's who we will be interviewing tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 Eastern, 3 GMT. The title of this interview will be The Last Heart Attack. Then at 9, you'll hear from Dr. Mimi Guarneri on eating and living for a healthy heart. And at 10, you'll hear from Dr. Kim Williams on proven steps to prevent and reverse heart disease. And in the meanwhile, you can post your comments and share in the conversation. You can catch and share the replays at foodrevolutionsummit.org/replays. You can check out the Empowerment Package. And I'd like to invite you to enjoy some delicious, healthy, nourishing food. We wish you a fabulous day. This is Ocean Robbins, signing off from day 4 in the Food Revolution Summit and looking forward very much to being with you tomorrow.